Hello, everyone, and a massive welcome to DevSecCon24. My name is Simon Maple. I'm from Sneak, and I'm going to kick off this with a very short opening just to let everyone know how to use the platform and so forth. So, as I mentioned, a massive welcome to actually our first entirely virtual conference called DevSecCon24. And actually, the conference is now 5 years old, as we celebrated in London last year. And what I love to always see is this evolution of how the logos have changed. And you can see we started back in 2015, and as it's grown, more recently, some of the amazing news is that Sneak acquired DevSecCon just last year, and we're looking to do some really amazing things to elevate and amplify this community as much as possible and continue being the premier DevSecOps conference around the world. Now, in 2020, we had some big plans about new areas that we wanted to have more conferences and things like that. But of course, needless to say, those plans were scuppered just slightly. So we are doing an amazing virtual 24-hour conference for everyone around the world right now, kicking off this minute. In 2021, we're going to be announcing a number of amazing plans which we're looking to do in person around the world, but we're going to do that in a way that we make sure that the community come first, and of course safety is paramount for our community, so we're going to make sure that that's done in the right way. So keep an eye out for some news in 2021 in later this year around some of our 2021 events. So for our virtual conference, we are looking at a platform called Brella, and you're hopefully watching on Brella right now, and you'll see on the left-hand side there is this sidebar, and you can see a number of different items that you can pick on that. So let's just go through these really quickly, just to familiarize yourself with the platform. So first of all, one of the most important things at a physical conference is that networking, that corridor track, as we like to call it. So you'll have already, when you registered, entered some of the things which you like to hear about or like to talk about, like to network, perhaps want a job around. So take a look at some of the other people with similar things that they want to talk about, or matching things that they've said that they enjoy, and get some meetings with people and actually reach out and form these connections that can go beyond just a single conference. Secondly, you can click on schedule, and on schedule, you can plan out your 24 hours. We have 8-hour blocks per region. So we have an Asia Pacific region kicking off now. In 8 hours time, we'll kick off EMEA. And then finally, the last 8 hours will be the Americas. Every single region kicks off with a keynote, and there are then a number of different talk types, including regular sessions, some Ignite sessions, and on the stream, which you can watch live, and hopefully you're there now watching live, you'll see a little click box on the top, which you can either view the main stream or an alternative stream, which is going to kick off a couple of hours in each region. And there'll be a number of different things along there, which you can also see in the schedule. Connect with our speakers. You can click on here and reach out to some of the speakers that are going to be featured across the 24 hours. So yeah, do connect, follow the speakers, and learn from them beyond just this 24-hour conference. Needless to say as well, do say hello to our sponsors. We have a number of lovely sponsors. Here we can see some platinum sponsors as well as some gold sponsors. So big thank you to GitHub, to Secure Code Warrior, to Sneak, of course, as the hosts and the stewards of the conference, and also to our gold sponsors, Bridge Crew, Veracode, Zero North, Datadog, StackHawk, Trend Micro, LaunchDarkly, Detectify, and Sonatype. So do thank our sponsors, and also go and see them. We have virtual booths. So click on that sponsor link on your menu, and you can see the virtual booths here. So you can click in, learn a little bit more about the sponsors, and also talk to some of the representatives who can chat to you live as well. You'll notice here also that we have a partner community. So this is our My DevSecOps community, and the passport contest, which will encourage you to go and see these different sponsor stands, the passport contest will ask you a number of questions, which you can see in the My DevSecOps virtual booth. And if you answer those questions correctly, you'll be put into a draw to win one of 3 top-notch iPads. So do go and do that. To do that, click on the My DevSecOps booth, enter that, and you'll see a booth very similar to this. Now, on the top right there, you'll see Passport Program, which I'm highlighting here. Click on that, and you will see this DevSecCon24 logo and a Typeform form that when you click on Submit Your Answers, you'll have 11 questions whereby you can answer each of the questions about some of the sponsor booths, and then by submitting that, you then get to enter our draw, which we will draw a little bit later. 2 of our sponsors are also doing something a little bit extra. We have a sponsor challenge from Secure Code Warrior, our platinum sponsor, that are offering this virtual tournament that's going to be running across the whole conference. So do click on the source of the Secure Code Warrior booth, and you can get the link to that. Also, Trend Micro, another of our sponsors, are doing a application security challenge. So click on their booth and challenge yourself to perform that lab as well. And there are dedicated hours where you can do that. That's 2 hours in every region. We also have a DevSecCon code of conduct, and this is very, very important. So please do take a look at this. Ultimately, all conference speakers and attendees and sponsors all must adhere to the DevSecCon code of conduct. We take this very, very seriously. We want to provide a harassment-free conference experience for everyone. Also, if anyone is being offensive or harassing others, and we are notified of that, we will do our utmost to make sure that is ratified and rectified, and we will take everything seriously. So if you experience any violation of the code of conduct, please let us know. info@devseccon.com. We will be monitoring this and we will be acting on that. So please do let us know. And that account, just so you know, has a number of people that get those emails, so there isn't just one person on that. So please do enjoy the conference. This is going to be a wonderful experience, and I will now pass over to our wonderful host, Alyssa Miller, who is going to be introducing the next few hours of our wonderful speakers. So Alyssa, I'll pass over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Simon. So thank you everybody for joining us. We are going to get things started here. As Simon mentioned, many great sponsors who have made this possible. You will see their names throughout the conference. But we're all set to get our first speaker up here. And so our first speaker is the CEO of Hyzen Technologies and Practical DevSecOps. He's got a diverse background in R&D and consulting. He's also the founder of Null Singapore, a massive security community in Singapore. And we are super fortunate to have him here with us today. So without further ado, I want to welcome Mohammed Imran. Take it away, Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Alisa. Pretty excited to be here. Could you please confirm if you're able to see my screen?
Yep, we are all set. You are good to go.
Hold on. Okay, great then. I guess you're able to see my screen. Thanks a lot. Welcome, everyone. As Alisa just mentioned, I'm Imran. Today, we are going to talk about what is continuous auditing, or you can also call it as what is compliance as code. And I believe this is the final frontier in digital transformation of DevSecOps. Let's see how compliance as code can help you achieve a massive amount of automation, and doing so, reduce the risk of your organization very drastically. So today, we are going to talk about a bit of introduction of what is DevSecOps, then we'll go into what is compliance so that we all are on the same page. And finally, we'll see how we can achieve compliance using code. And don't let that word code scare you, even though you are from a compliance background, right? It's very easy. The current technology will allow you to automate with just simple two-liners. We'll look into that. And finally, we will end the session with a demo where I will show you how we can embed compliance and compliance tests as part of CI/CD pipeline. And it will not take like ages to finish, but rather it will just take a couple of minutes to achieve compliance as code. And we'll see that, and we'll end the presentation with what else we can do in an organization, probably right after this presentation. Right? So Alisa have already introduced me, so I will just skip this part. And in order to be on the same page, let's talk a little bit about what is DevSecOps. And I realize that there is no agreed upon definition on what is DevSecOps. So this is just my attempt to bring all of us on the same page. So I believe history teaches a lot in terms of what's going to happen in the future as well, right? So it was very important to look back why we started off with DevOps and DevSecOps. So if you notice on the screen, you'll see that there was a huge disconnect between what a business wanted versus what developers used to provide to the business as a solution. And in order to solve this problem, business came up with novel ways of solving these problems. Among them, one such methodology, one such method is your agile, right? Instead of waiting for like 6 months or a year or 2 years to provide feedback to the customers, we will now, instead of waiting for a year, we will provide feedback to the customer on a regular basis, probably once a week, twice a week, or whatever, right? Now, they solve this disconnect between business and development teams using agile. Now you see, when developers tried implementing agile, they were able to push code to production on a very regular basis, probably every 9 seconds. There are some organizations which push code to production every 9 seconds, right? Now, since developer teams were able to push code to production on such a rapid phase, operations were the bottleneck for them, which means they were not able to cope up with the amount of code developers were creating. And in order to solve this, developers and operations teams tried to see what can we do to improve this bottleneck? What can we improve in the process? What can we do to improve the technology so that as soon as a developer pushes code to production, it can go to, as soon as they push code to version control system, it can go to production very seamlessly in a less amount of time. And they solve this disconnect, the problem or the silos, with the help of a methodology and a new way of doing software development called DevOps, right? And by definition, DevOps had security as part of the initiative. But then, just like everything else, security was left behind. We'll explore why. What are some of the reasons why security was left behind? But then eventually, now people are talking about, we need to talk about security as part of DevOps, right? And I consider that as a final frontier of the DevSecOps or DevOps transformation, right? And then security did, thanks to the awesome work of communities like My DevSecOps, conferences like DevSecCon, across the world, a lot of people are contributing this to this education effort, right? Thanks to that, a lot of people are now embedding security as part of CI/CD pipelines. However, I still see the compliance team still struggling to embed security as part of CI/CD pipeline or DevOps or DevSecOps, right? So this presentation, I'll show you how we can automate compliance with minimal amount of efforts, right? So let's move on and see what else we can do to improve this practice, the compliance as code, right? As I mentioned before, when I say DevSecOps, it's about application security in DevOps environment or security in DevOps environment. And as you can see on your screen as well, I started the slide with DevSecOps, but then the first sentence talks about only about DevOps. So I personally believe there is no such term called DevSecOps. But then we have to bring attention of developers or operations teams or DevOps or the whole organization that we do need to implement security as part of CI/CD pipelines or DevOps. The reason for that is we have been talking about security is everyone's responsibility. I know, and we can realize and know how well we have implemented this as a security team. And we still see there's a lot of disconnect or silos between various teams, organizations, various teams, and across the organization, there's a lot of silos. And we do regularly talk about we need to concentrate on people, processes, and technologies. And DevSecOps provides you the framework to implement these things in practice, right? And in order to implement DevSecOps, I believe you need to have 4 important principles, or you have to implement these 4 principles. One among them is culture, and probably the least appreciated or least understood aspect of DevSecOps is culture. Usually people are drawn towards automation because that's the shiniest or the most sexy aspect of DevSecOps. Whereas if you don't work on culture, right, what happens is that all of these other aspects of DevSecOps will suffer. If you don't have culture, then automation will suffer. And similarly, measurement and sharing. You can call, and as part of these people practices, you have culture and measurement and sharing, which boils down to you trying to continuously share the feedback to your end customers. For you, that is developers or DevOps teams, wherein you will provide, this is the state of security for your app or your organization. We want to make sure this does not happen next time. And we want to also ensure that we use the tools which are used by developers or operations teams. Instead of creating our own tooling, it would be much, much better to use the tooling of developers. And that will reduce your context switch between moving from a developer-friendly tool versus, and then moving on to a very security-focused tool. And when the developers do context switch, the mean time to remediate vulnerabilities will drastically increase. We have seen that if you provide information to developers at the right time, at the right place, and with the right amount of context, then they will be able to fix a vulnerability pretty easily in a very short span of time. In one of the organizations, we have seen that the mean time to remediate has decreased from 2 months to just 15 minutes because they were able to see the issues early on and the place where they love to see that, which is most probably your CI/CD pipelines, right? And then if you move on from a process perspective, right, we have measurement and sharing. And it's very imperative that we provide the feedback and the information and the metrics to the developers where they need it, which is typically your CI/CD pipeline. I have seen a tremendous amount of improvement in terms of how organizations do security when they expose these metrics to your organization. Maybe you have a dashboard which lists down, okay, we have 10 different projects and each of them are either in the red, green, or orange based on their maturity of DevSecOps. And that drastically improves the feedback and the education and awareness in the company and will help you achieve massive gains in how we see security. Similarly, when it comes to technology, automation will help you achieve the speed. And if you do this, we will have a lot of benefits, specifically the speed, reliability, and flexibility. And one side effect of speed is if an organization is doing a waterfall model, and in order to fix a vulnerability, they might need probably an year to fix a vulnerability because the development or the deployment cadence is once a year. So you have to wait a complete year to fix a vulnerability in production. Whereas with the help of DevOps or DevSecOps, you will be able to fix that vulnerability very frequently. Maybe since developers are pushing code to production every 9 seconds, you have ability to fix a vulnerability also every 9 seconds. That provides massive gains to both security and DevSecOps. Now, if DevOps or DevSecOps provides so many benefits, why are we not doing it? Right? What are the current problems which compliance teams are facing in order to implement these technologies? Right? Let's talk about that, and we'll explore this with the help of a very simple case. We have this imaginary company called Teachera. They are an education platform, and they are doing pretty good for themselves. They just finished their Series C, and they are doing pretty good for themselves. And because of the exposure in the media, they got attention from hackers as well. And because of that, they just saw that they got breached twice, not just once, but twice. And in order to fix this, they hired Brad. And the first thing which Brad did, as soon as he came in, he did the gap analysis or threat modeling or risk assessment. And he realized that the organizations or his organization got compromised because they were not hardening the infrastructure. And then they are not also ensuring that we are continuously checking for compliance, right? And they also realized that there is a huge attack surface in terms of application itself, right? They were vulnerable to OWASP top 10. So that's one of the problem he had. And before he solved it, he also saw that security and compliance teams are outnumbered. So his ratio was for every 100 developers, he had one security engineer. So the organization had about 200 developers, and he only had 2 people who were dedicated to security, one for network side of security, more of a traditional InfoSec, and then another person, Lisa, who was responsible for application security. Right? That's one problem he faced. But as soon as they tried to implement security, brought in a lot of processes, best practices, compliance, and standards and rules, they realized that the DevOps teams, because Teachera is a very forward-looking company, and they are using DevOps practices to achieve faster feedback with their customers and provide good value or features to the customer on a regular basis. And they realized that quickly the DevOps teams are reluctant to work with security. And then when they did a survey with the help of his CTO, CIO, they realized that they don't want to work with security because they don't know how the security works how the DevOps works, and their tools and how the tools are pretty slow, and how the tools reduce the speed at which they go to production, right? So that's the one problem we face. The first problem we have, the security is outnumbered. Second problem is the security tooling, the culture or the automation or the processes are not yet ready for DevOps, right? And then you typically see, if you want to automate compliance or just doing traditional compliance, you'll be asked to fill a bunch of Excel sheets. And probably, most likely, that same information will be repeated again and again or in different Excel sheets. So that's another problem which DevOps teams have with compliance. And then there's another argument now that people say, okay, can you guarantee if we are compliant that we will not be getting hacked, right? So compliance doesn't mean that we are secure or vice versa, right? It's a side effect of security, but then when you are compliant, it doesn't mean the security is taken care of altogether, right? And we'll see typical scenarios like Equifax and Capital One and all. These are some of the companies which were compliant to different standards, but then they still got hacked because they missed it. Or there's so much of technology, there's so much of change going on a regular basis in DevOps environments that it's very difficult to keep up. And one such way of handling this chaos or handling this uncertainty is DevOps. Of course, no one is trying to say that you will be able to catch 100% of the issues, but probably we can gain 60 to 80% of the quick wins if we implement security and compliance as part of CI/CD pipelines, right? Now let's look at how organizations are doing security, right? So typically organizations fill up the forms, Excel sheets, and then they provide it to auditors. But with the advent of DevOps or the container technology, an average age of a container is just 12 hours. And it's very difficult in that 12 hours to harden the infrastructure and then to ensure that it's compliant according to your policies, unless we are continuously auditing it, continuously measuring it, and continuously making sure that it stays compliant, right? So if we do implement compliance as code, we will achieve all of these benefits. And just like security, compliance is in a similar boat as well, right? If 100:1 is the ratio between developers and security, security team versus the compliance team, our risk team, the GRC team, whatever you call them, is similar. Like for every 10 security engineers, probably you have one compliance person or one GRC person. So they are also outnumbered, right? And then with the container technology, you can scale the Docker containers from hundreds to thousands just in a matter of seconds. And keeping up with the volume is very, very difficult unless we automate the compliance aspect of DevSecOps. And apart from that, it helps you provide faster feedback so that you don't have to look for where did we store that Excel sheet, right? With just a click of a button, you will be able to bring in a list of compliance reports, which auditors can easily review. By click of a button, they will be able to generate reports from across the repositories, across the infrastructure. And that gives comfort even to the auditors that, yes, they are doing security, even in DevOps environments. And one problem we also see is that sometimes you need to educate auditors themselves that, hey, this is how we do security in DevOps world, which is very drastic or very different if you look at your traditional compliance. We do provide separation of duties. We do provide trust but verify, trust but verify as a phenomena. But then we do it in a very different way in DevOps, and it's drastically different from waterfall model. Right? And it also provides you repeatability. If you automate one system, you can very well automate it, scale it across the different systems. Right? And there are different ways of handling compliance. One way is you could just continue whatever you are doing, but this definitely doesn't work in DevOps environments. So you need to improve upon what we can do to achieve the speed which developers are looking, so that we won't be a bottleneck to them. Right? One such way, without costing you a huge amount of money, is use the existing configuration management system, be it Terraform, CloudFormation, or if you're using on-prem kind of system, maybe you have Ansible, Chef, Puppet. You can use those also to achieve compliance, or you can use dedicated tooling like you have Open Policy Agent, InSpec, and whatnot. Right? So with that, what I will do is I'll show you a quick demo on how a traditional pipeline, a traditional compliance initiative can be moved to a CI/CD pipeline and still can provide you a lot of benefit. And you can automate about 60 to 80% of your compliance efforts, no matter if you're using an on-prem system or on cloud system. So let's look into a quick example here. So what you're seeing here is a GitLab CI implementation, a CI/CD pipeline implementation. And don't let this scare you. But what I want to show you is that we have automated here compliance with just 2 lines of code, which is this. As you can see here, we have we're installing a tool called InSpec. It's a free open source tool to do compliance as code. And you see we are hardening a Linux operating system, which is at the IP address 10.0.1.22, and then see how active or how compliant is this machine, right? As you can see, when we ran this pipeline, you will see that we ran a bunch of tests here, probably about 100 here, and then among this 100, we have about 21 success. We made sure that 21 of these controls were successful, meaning that we are still adhering to those compliance initiatives, compliance aspects of be it PCI DSS or whatnot. And then among these, 30 controls failed, which means you still have work to do. But if you look at it, some of these are not, some of them are not so severe that you will fail your compliance objectives or you will fail your audits. Right? Then your team can then put this into backlog and then continuously iterate on it and make sure that you don't have any reds here. So the green is good here and the red is bad. And you might be wondering, if we do compliance as code, maybe it takes a lot of time for you to do. And as you can see, this is the pipeline which I just ran. As you can see, the entire pipeline can be done in just 6 minutes and 43 seconds. As you can see, I'm running static analysis to ensure we are compliant to different audits or different standards that we have to have static analysis as part of CI/CD systems, as part of software development. We also are testing here for SCA, dependency scanning. Right? We are also making sure our containers are secure from bugs and vulnerabilities with the help of artifact scanning. And we're also making sure that we run dynamic analysis scans on a regular basis before we deploy to staging our production environments. And if you notice, in the production, we are making sure the environment is hardened on probably every deployment. And then we're also making sure this infrastructure stays compliant. And this can be configured on a per commit basis or on a per deployment basis on a regular interval. Maybe you want to make sure our system is still compliant every 12 hours. And if you click on this link on the compliance aspect of here, you see it just took me 1 minute and 21 seconds to achieve this. Right? I've automated this with just 2 lines of code, and then we were able to find out if the system is still compliant after we hardening it in just 1 minute. And you will also see that this is very easy to do as well. Okay, let's look at an example. When people say, compliance as code, we can automate compliance as code, and they usually say, okay, Imran, this is all good and fair, but I probably don't know how to code. But let's explore why that's not a big issue. As you can see, the syntax which you see on your screen, the code, though it looks scary, it's just a couple of lines of YAML. It's a file format, which is traditionally used by modern DevOps tooling, be it CI/CD pipelines, Kubernetes, and different other modern systems, even Open Policy Agent. And as you can see here, we are just running a tool using Ansible here. We are trying to harden infrastructure with the help of an open source hardening role called OS hardening from dev-sec project. And in order to run this, all you have to do is just run that command, Ansible playbook, Ansible hardening. And eventually, you want to make sure once we harden it, it stays compliant to our standards, right? Whatever standards or policies we have to adhere to, right? And you can easily create a PCI DSS or SOX or a SOC 2 compliant with the help of InSpec. It's a free open source tool. We'll look into what that is in a minute. And in order to run this, all you have to do is just run one-liner, And as you can see here, we are running it on a Windows machine. The password of that is DevSecOps. There's a bunch of ways of running it on Linux machine, Docker containers, what have you, right? Now, as I mentioned, people are really, really scared about code. When we say compliance as code, infrastructure as code, security as code, they are very scared. But fact is, whatever you call it, security as code, compliance as code, infrastructure as code, it's just a bunch of text files or YAML files which help you achieve compliance or security in aspect of it. And people, you might be laughing at it, but that's the reality, right? It's very, very easy to do compliance. We now have all the technological pieces to implement compliance and automate compliance with ease, right? And InSpec is such a tool which helps you automate this. And it's very easy to understand. And then, and you can do automation. If you can understand English language, you can automate with the help of InSpec. And it supports a bunch of operating systems, and it has extensive language. If you want to improve it further, then you can definitely do that. And then a typical workflow of how this looks like would be, you will start off with hardening the infrastructure. And once you harden it, in order to ensure that this stays compliant, you regularly run your compliance checks on this one. And as soon as your compliance checks fail, you can automatically start the hardening aspect, or you can email your operations team or your security team or your SOC operations as well. And if the tests pass, then you don't have any action to do. You can very well move on to the next stage and then do what you're good at, which is trying to make sure our organization reduces the risk, both from a business perspective and also from technology perspective. And then if we do all of this, we will achieve compliance objectives, compliance as code objectives. Right? And as you can see on your screen, it's very easy to write as well. As you can see, what we are saying here is, as part of PCI DSS, we have to run an antivirus software on each machine. As you can see, the second line there, which says describe service ClamAV, which is an operating system, and we are making sure it should be installed, it should be enabled, and it should be running. As simple as that. If you can understand English, you can write compliance as code scripts. You will also see that we want to also make sure there's a file called etc password, and then it should be a file. And you do have a lot of helpful guides like CSI benchmarks to help you learn what these are, and you can automate it. And if you say that, Imran, I'm still not comfortable doing it, you can hire a software developer, or you can you can take help of your security team in order for you to do this. It's very easy to do. Again, as I mentioned, it runs on Windows, Linux, Mac, even on mainframes. And as I mentioned before, people have done a lot of work on this in order to automate compliance, some aspects of compliance. So 80% of your job is already done. You only have to figure out the rest of this 20%, which is usually involves tweaking these rule sets or profiles or controls according to your requirements. Let's say you only have to be compliant with PCI DSS, then you will remove the standards of other probably. Again, you can leave that be, but if you think it's overwhelming you, then probably you can say, okay, according to PCI DSS, we have to adhere to these best practices. We will enable that, run those things for project 1, project A. And then project B has to be compliant with SOC 2. Then probably you will improve these scripts or change these scripts to ensure we are running necessary automation. Then we are necessary scripts to make sure that happens there, right? And Dev-Sec hardening framework is one such project which will help you achieve this kind of automation with ease. And they have a lot of automation, be it for SSH servers, Linux servers, be it for CSI benchmarks and whatnot. So definitely you can do this. And then not only we have InSpec, you can also use Ansible, OpenSCAP, even Open Policy Agent to ensure you convert your policies as code. And one of the problem we usually see is that your policy documents are a liability to you. What do I mean by that? You put in policy that these are the policies we follow in the organization. When an auditor comes in, they look at this policy and then they see, oh, you're not probably adhering to all of these. And that usually involves convincing your auditor that yes, we are trying to do security. We have these different controls which mitigate this risk. But when you have compliance as code, you'll be able to just click a button and then create these nice dashboards, metrics, and even the reports, so that the auditors have assurance that we are following it. And then converting those policies into code allows you to enforce this on a regular basis, even while this is happening in your staging environment or development environment. So you don't have to wait till the end, right? We all hear about this concept called shift left, which ensures that we catch issues early on. So which also reduces your efforts when auditors are going to come into the organization to audit your organization against the compliance. And also make sure that your team knows and understand what we need to do to achieve those compliance objectives. Right? I think with that, I will end my presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Mohammed. Again, just a reminder for everybody, if you have questions for any of our speakers throughout the conference, you can add those just right to the chat window there in Umbrella. Imran, while we wait to see if anyone else has any questions, I have one for you.
Sure.
As you look at organizations that do implement compliance as code, is there a particular type of organization that you see that gets better use out of this, or maybe is able to use it more effectively?
Yeah, so we do see a lot of organizations from healthcare, even unicorns, both in Asia and US and UK, and you don't have to be a unicorn to benefit out of compliance as code. So we do see even companies which are still in the process of doing their DevOps transformation, they still benefit if they can work on the culture, the measurement and sharing aspect of it, even without automation, right? So the quick wins definitely are automation, could be achieved with the help of automation, but even without automation, you can see quick wins. For example, now as soon as you convert your policy into a document which can be stored as part of your source code, then they can be checked into part of the source code along with the project. And then they see, okay, if I have to go live, I have to achieve these compliance objectives. So you can use something like BDD security and Gauntlet to make sure those things are being done while the developers are still coding it, right? So you don't even have to go to the end to achieve compliance objectives. And then I have seen, as I mentioned, you can be a waterfall organization, but by giving this information, ASVS is a very good example of that OWASP project, ASVS, that helps you look in from a security requirements perspective, like if I have to achieve these compliance objectives, what do I have to implement in my code or in my infrastructure or in my processes? And then that will give you enough information from a project management perspective, and then also from a timeline perspective. So they don't have to wait till the end to come back to you and say, okay, we are ready to go live. Can you please make sure that we are still compliant, and then can we go live, right? Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that does. That's terrific. So I'm looking, I don't see any other questions from the audience at this point. So want to say thank you again. Really appreciate the time. And it was a really fascinating presentation. Definitely appreciate it. And
thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you, DevSecCon. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, we're going to take a short break here, and then we will move on to our next speaker. All right, everybody, we're going to get started or restarted here in just a few moments with our next speaker. But first, just a few notes to remind you about some of the features here at DevSecCon24. Be sure to check out the Brella platform and go to our sponsors area. You can go through that sponsors area. We have the Passport Challenge going. Remember, you can enter yourself in a drawing for an iPad. So be sure to check out that. Check out all the great materials our sponsors have to offer there in that area. Also, don't forget about our networking area as well, the virtual lobby con, if you will. Meet some of your peers who are here attending the conference with you and set up meetings or chat or just learn about what it is that other people who are part of this conference do on a daily basis and what you might have in common, what topics you might all be interested in together. So we're going for 24 hours here, plenty of time to check out some great content. We'll have more breaks coming up as well where you can go out and check out those vendor areas and so forth. But for now, we're going to introduce our next speaker. So our next speaker is a solution architect at Octopus Deploy. He says he specializes in project rescue, governance, and development methodologies. He's a fan of high quality code. I think we all are, or I hope we all are. Maybe that's why we're here. But so for our next session, let me introduce Andrew Harcourt. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alyssa. Hi, everybody. Hi from sunny Brisbane. It's one of the few places in the world where you can get sunburnt in the middle of winter. So firstly, thank you to all of the organizers. You've done a fantastic job in putting this event on, especially given the very difficult circumstances. Thank you to the sponsors, and obviously thank you to the attendees for turning up, even virtually turning up. Thank you. It's wonderful to have you here. So a little bit about me. So I'm at Octopus Deploy at present. I've spent a lot of time. I've been coding since I was about 5 years old, and that's getting far too long a time to talk about now. Before Octopus, I was at ThoughtWorks as a principal consultant there. I spent some time at Redify, and then before that, in a different part of my life, once upon a time, I was a pen tester. This was back in the days before Meterpreter was a thing. I am assured that the world has moved on. So let's get started with a quick overview. So I want to talk a little bit about doing the right thing. So this talk is about treating security as a first-class concern in our domain model, but I want to talk about why that doesn't happen. So why is doing the right thing so difficult? We're going to talk, the meat of this talk is about security modeling in our domain, how a rich domain model is actually going to help us model our security and be able to test our security constraints. And we'll cover a little bit about infrastructure, not so much as the focus of this talk, but as how this plays nicely together. First things first, though, I wanted to ask a question, and that means I'm monitoring the Brella stream, so please pipe up in the comments if you can. I wanted to ask, who went for a ride today? Who rode their bicycle, or went for a run, or did some exercise of any sort? And I'll be the first to confess that I didn't. My bike stayed on its rack this morning. I haven't done my push-ups, and the reason for that was that I was getting ready for presenting at this conference. That's no real surprise. Who's eaten enough vegetables this week? Now we all know this is good for us, right? Come on, who's eat your veggies, right? Who's drunk enough water? Who's got enough sleep? Why not? And who's patched all their servers? Be honest. Who's patched everything this week? Who can genuinely say, someone went for it, Thomas Griffiths went for a run. Congratulations, one person. So who's patched all their servers this week and upgraded all your dependencies and actually released it to production, right? And why not? Because some of us have, but I'm willing to bet more than a cookie that most of us haven't. So why is this hard? Why is doing the right thing so difficult? And how can we make it easier to do the right thing? So when we're talking about writing secure code, obviously not creating vulnerabilities in the first place is a good thing. But it's not always easy to do that. I just don't write bugs, right? That's easy. Everyone says that. But what if it's hard to reason about the rules? And then let's assume that okay, fine. So we've found a vulnerability. We've identified it at least, which is great. I guess if given the thing exists, we'd rather know about it than not. And we've probably even fixed it. But what if we can't ship? How are we confident that we haven't broken our other functionality? And where this comes to is, well, writing good tests means writing safer code. But what if it's hard to write those good tests? And some of the things that we do in the name of infrastructure automation or in the name of security make it hard to write good tests. Writing good tests really is dependent. I mean, obviously, you have to write nice code in the beginning. You have to write testable code. But writing good tests, you need to be able to run them easily. And when we look at where tests run, it's a pretty good indicator of how difficult it is to write them in the first place. And remember, the more difficult it is, the less likely people are to write them well, or to run them, or to care. Right? If I can run all of my tests for the entire application suite on a single dev workstation, and there are dev workstations that can do that unless you're Google, it's pretty simple to just run all of the tests, have it give us an answer in a few seconds, maybe a few tens of seconds if it's a large application suite. And I've got an answer that I'm comfortable with. My tests are green. We're all good. I'm happy to write this. I'm happy to ship it. All right. If we need to, let's start introducing some dependencies though. Let's say, well, okay, it can run locally on a workstation, but it needs a database, which means we're either running up SQL Server if we're old school, or we Docker Compose up the universe, or we run something up on whatever local your favorite database platform. We run an in-memory database. Yeah, but it's not as easy. I'm still going to do it because I'm a good engineer, but it's not as easy. It just adds that little bit of friction, and maybe that little bit of friction is okay. But then we look at, well, okay, maybe I need to run new kube control apply -f, or actually that doesn't work because I've got to do a whole bunch of substitutions. So now I'm trying to install Helm charts locally just to run all of these tests on Minikube. And we're getting into the realms of, this is getting to be a bit of a chore. If we look at the other end of the spectrum, okay, now I have to do a git push just to run some tests on a build agent. Or worse, you mean the DevOps team is going to run my tests for me, or by the testing team, which is a separate group of people who live in a different building on a different floor, and they probably think that I live in a cave, and I probably think that they live under a rock. And no, just no, this isn't going to happen. We're not going to have good tests. If it's too hard to run them, no one's going to bother to write them. So why does that matter? Well, the problem is that when we talk about composing our application suite, we tend to try to pluck components off the shelf. And this is a good thing, right? If you're rolling your own authentication framework, that might be your core business, but otherwise you're probably doing it wrong. Likewise, if you're putting logic in your API gateways, that's probably not the right place for it. The difficulty is that everywhere we outsource logic, we also make it more complex to test. If I can test a self-contained little component, then I'm going to be a whole lot more confident than if I have to spool up an instance of an API gateway or a firewall or a this or a that. So when we're outsourcing, we need to be very, very careful about what we choose to outsource and what we don't. As a fundamental principle, you outsource only your periphery. You outsource the commodities. You don't outsource the core of what you do. Unfortunately, that will contrast quite starkly with the messaging that you'll get from enterprise middleware vendors who want to sell you everything, where you end up with clever pipes and dumb endpoints rather than the converse. So we want to give some thought to what is sensible to outsource. So we're going to play a little game first. It's called Spot the Bug. All right. Now, this bug, it doesn't currently appear in the OWASP top 10, but it usually makes appearances here and there. You'll spot it pretty easily. And I will promise to send, so I'm in Brisbane, Australia, I will promise to send you a Byron Bay cookie in the mail physically to the first person who can put a message into the chat telling me what this bug is. So welcome to our cafe. We're giving away coffee. It's awesome. Unfortunately, this is a virtual conference, so this is virtual coffee. Our incremental cost of goods sold is 0. Nonetheless, welcome to DevSecCon24. Let's have a look at this. So this is a little app that I spun up earlier. It's our free little cafe application, and it's got some woeful security holes in them. Some are deliberate, some are just to put the scaffolding there. So what we're going to do, I'm logged in as Andrew at the moment, but you can see there's no password, there's no authentication, that doesn't really matter. What's the bug? So I'm going to log in as Andrew. Right. And I'm going to go to my orders collection. This is my order history. So let's have a look at my order history. And you can see that I haven't drunk all that much coffee today. I've ordered a flat white with 1 sugar, and I'm going to view its details. That's your cue, spot the bug. Now I'm going to copy that URL. I'm going to go back to the homepage and I'm going to log in as Damien. Andrew, Nick, and Damien, by the way, are just three mates. They'll likely heckle each other a little bit, but nobody here is malicious. Nonetheless, there are two my orders in it. That's actually a good catch, but it's not the bug. These are queues. The 1 and 2 are queues for me, so I know which one is which. This one is the not secure one. This is the slightly more secure one. Good catch, though. Good attempt. Floor is still open. Have a go. What's the bug? So I'm going to log in as Damien. No, that's not the bug either. You can see that I've changed. I'm now in my user context as Damien. And if I go to Damien's order collection, we can see that Damien's coffee order is the extra shot flat white. And we can view its details and we can see, okay, so this is, I'm logged in as Damien. This is an order for Damien and there's an extra shot flat white there. Session invalidation, good guess. What I'm looking for, you'll spot it in a second as soon as I go to the address bar. What's going to happen when I hit paste? I'm going to paste that previous URL in. I'm going to hit enter. Oops. Logged in as Damien. I can see an order for Andrew. We've got a direct object access bug. How did that happen? Am I an idiot? When I wrote this thing, what was I thinking? What I was thinking, and I'm going to bring up the code for a second. Now, don't freak out. It's just code. It's not an alien. This is the code. This is the code that has the bug. You are correct. Your guess is that you can go to another person's account. You can't go to their account, but you can go to things that are owned by them. And the reason for that is because I've got a weak, anemic domain model here. And you can see this, right? We're taking an order ID as a route parameter. We're materializing that directly from an order repository, and then we're just mapping that to our view model, and we're putting it straight onto the screen. We're not even checking for who owns this order. Whoops. But be honest. Who's never, ever, ever written code like this? I was thinking about my next coffee. I didn't have it. And you can see that our code tool, our resharper, is actually even telling us, hey, you've got this logged in customer thing that you are not using. Maybe you want to deal with this. The bug isn't actually session management. This will work even if it's nobody. If we're logged in with absolutely nobody, this will still work. So let's have a look at what this code could have looked like instead. So let's flick back to this one and have a look here. So here's our bug. It's direct object access. I can paste in a URL and I can access stuff. Now we've got one saving grace, which is that it's a GUID, so it's a little bit harder to inspect, but it's still not that hard. And here's our bug. I've taken a dependency on an order repository and I've gone and fetched that. However, if we tweaked that very slightly, what we could have done is we could have used our ORM and our rich domain model to help us out here. We could have said, rather than just going straight to the orders repository, what we're going to do is we're still going to take the order ID from our route parameter, but then what we're going to do is we're going to resolve the logged in customer. We are then going to go from the customer via their orders collection to get that order ID. Now, if this order doesn't live in that customer's orders collection, it doesn't exist. We get a 404 instead. So if I go to the slightly different implementation, which is going to do that, what we'll end up with is a 404. Pretty graceless 404, but it's a 404. Happy days. Obviously, we've dressed that up a lot more nicely, but there we go. So a richer domain model would have saved us even in this elementary manner. So let's talk about domain modeling and let's talk about rich domain models and how they can help us. I'm going to make a couple of non-contentious statements and then people are going to freak out. So you just watch. So a couple of principles. If there's a thing, there should probably be a class for that thing. This is OOP 101. If there's a thing called a customer, then there should probably be a customer class. And if there's a thing called an order, then there should probably be an order class. Likewise, if there's an action, there should probably be a method that represents that action. So something can do a place order. And so what we'll end up with is something like this. We have an order class, we have an order placing service, and wait, what? So like a wild order just appears out of nowhere. Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I guess so. No, this is terrible code. And if you were thinking, actually, this doesn't look too bad, it looks neat and tidy, that's actually part of the problem. This code is terrible. It's dangerous, and it's even more dangerous because it looks neat. Well-formatted code can still be terrible code. What's wrong with this? Well, we've got a bunch of things. One, the domain model is completely anemic. Our order class can just be manipulated. It's basically nothing but a dumb state bag. The second thing is that things can be done to that object by everyone, whenever. And we don't really know what's been done to the thing. We can never assume it's valid. We can't really trust it. And what that means is that we tend to outsource a whole lot of our precondition checks. This is terrible. Don't do it this way. Please don't do it to yourself. So the principle that's going to be a little bit contentious, even though it shouldn't be, is whoever does the thing should own the action. Rather than an order placing service, we want to have a place order method on our customer. Now, we'll probably still have some kind of order placement service, but what it's going to be responsible for is resolving our customer and telling it to do a thing, giving it the dependencies that it needs if it needs anything, giving it the information it needs to make its decision, and then telling it to do that thing. So the reason for that is that the things that have actions performed on them must consent to having those actions performed. So if we look at a really, really simple cafe model, right? We've got our customer, and our customer has some orders. So it has some behaviors. And in this case, our customer's behavior is place order. And we're going to place an order with a barista. All right. So our customer is going to make up an order. Hi, I'd like whatever my current order is, please. And I'm going to call barista.accept this order. Now, this is mimicking what happens in real life. In real life, you walk into a cafe, an order doesn't just magically appear. You communicate with someone. An actor in the system communicates with another actor in the system. Both of them have to agree on what's going to happen. So in this case, when we look over at our barista class, what we can see is that the barista has an accept method, which takes an order and a customer, and the barista can say no. Now, this is really, really important for security as well as for our domain logic. So it's an internal method. It's not a public method, so we can't just call it from outside. But if we have a look at the precondition checks, what we can see is that the barista can refuse for any reason they like as long as it's valid and lawful. So if the barista is on their lunch break, no, I'm not making you coffee, I'm busy. Right? Likewise, if you're just a rude customer, then you're not welcome here. No, I'm not making you coffee, go away. But assuming that the barista is actually not on their lunch break and that I'm a polite customer, and given that I like my local cafe, of course I'm going to be polite to them. Given that I'm a good person, hopefully I'll be polite regardless. But the barista is going to check their preconditions, and if they're happy and they will consent, they will perform the action, they will undergo the state change. We're all good. So what does this have to do with security? Well, what we can do is we can prevent actions from happening unless everybody involved, every party involved, consents to that action happening. Consent's given or withheld for various reasons, and rich domain models can actually have a meaningful opinion. If we've just got a dumb state bag, it doesn't know if it's legal to do a particular operation. But if we have entities that have state and behavior, then they can say, look, I'm willing to perform that action or I'm not, or even I'm willing to let you read that information or not. This isn't just a change control mechanism. This is also a read control mechanism. So if we're going to put a whole bunch of logic onto our customer, so for this instance, I've only got a place order method, but if we're actually going to try to shoehorn all of this logic into a single customer class, isn't that going to be a disaster? Well, I mean, yeah, we'll end up with a deity object customer class, and that's a very bad thing. Don't do it. However, what we've just discovered, though, is we've actually got a domain modeling problem. We've got a context boundary problem. Our customer is operating in different contexts at different times, and we need to represent that in different ways. So if we look at some of the methods on this customer, let's see if we can group them. So we've got a place order, we've got a sign up, we've got cancel our account. Yeah, they can request an extra shot. That's probably something to do with placing an order. Tipping might be, or it might not be. Making a complaint, no. Asking for the key to the restroom, different context. Likewise, although in Australia, visiting the restroom and stealing toilet paper was actually a thing. Apologies, world. We will do better than that. Likewise, sneezing. 6 months ago, we wouldn't have cared if a customer sneezed. Now, we really do care if a customer keeps sneezing somewhere. That's saying something that we might want to pay attention to. But all of these actions tend to be done in different contexts. So what we want to do is we want to look at introducing some role-based classes for some of our customers. Some of our actors in the system can be the same physical entity, but modeled in different ways in different contexts. And what this allows us to do is start codifying some of our constraints around our domain. To Mohammed's point earlier, we can automate some of our compliance constraints by doing this, just by writing tests around who can do what, under what circumstances, and we can also document those via the tests that we write. So if we start splitting out some of the actions into role-based classes, then we can say things like, well, rather than this customer can do a thing, a loyalty club member can redeem a reward, and a complainant can make a complaint. Yes, they might actually be a customer. Side note, don't use inheritance, use composition or object graph traversal, but they're the same physical entity being modeled in a different way for a different context, and that's perfectly okay. So the question that immediately pops up is, isn't this just like role-based access control? And your enterprise middleware vendors will be jumping up and down and saying, hey, but this is exactly what you should use an API gateway for. Or you know what? We've got an enterprise service bus that's just for you that will do all of this for you magically so you don't have to worry about it. And they'd like you to believe that. And some of them themselves do believe it. And there are good cases to be made for using enterprise middleware in some cases like this. But let's give some thought to this. If we just state a really simple constraint, only a loyalty club member may redeem rewards. That looks pretty okay, right? You've got a role, loyalty club member, and you've got an action. You can do that, yeah, no worries. Let's take a slightly more serious example. Only a doctor can review a patient's chart. Yeah, fair enough. All right. Now, in reality, there'll be other people who can review a patient's chart, but let's say for the sake of argument that we have a role, doctor, we have a role, patient, and doctors can view patients' charts, except that that's not how the real world works. The real world gets a little bit more messy. If we say only a doctor may review a patient's chart, but only when that doctor is treating that patient, yeah, well, okay, we could probably model that by just adding them to a security. Ooh, we do have a bit of a cross-product problem, though, because we're going to have security groups for an intersection of doctor and patient, or maybe we make some assumptions about, well, this patient is attending that hospital, so all of the doctors at this hospital can do that. Yeah, we can still do this with an RBAC system. Yeah. Oh, okay, this gets a little bit harder. So only a doctor can review a patient's chart, but only while that doctor's treating that patient or for 3 months afterwards. But that's still not how the real world works, is it? We all know this. This is a whole lot more like the way the real world works. And all of a sudden, we are way beyond access control lists. We are way beyond being able to outsource this to anything like an API gateway. We can try, but what's going to happen is our API gateway is going to have to learn a whole lot about our domain, which means our API gateway gets smart. So now we've got a smart pipe and a smartish endpoint. Where do our tests run? Well, to run all of our tests, now we have to spool up everything. We've got to spool up an API gateway with all of the smart logic in it, as well as our application, which has still got some smart logic in it. Now this means we're probably not going to be able to run it on a developer workstation, and the developers in the audience are looking at this going, oh man, you just made me sign into Azure or the AWS console and you're not my friend anymore. So that might be the end of it, but it's actually not. It gets even more complicated than that. We've got really, really, really complicated business rules about who can do what, when, under what circumstances, what the exceptions are, and then we've got to write all of this down in a codifiable way. We've got to be able to honor our compliance obligations by saying, hey, these are the rules that we applied at this particular time to give this person access to perform that action to this subject and so on. Right? We're not in RBAC territory anymore here. This is not going to work. We need our domain logic to be responsible for answering these queries and providing these constraints. So if we look at something like what we can do is we can say, well, you know, if you're one of these things and you can do these you can perform these actions under those circumstances, we can use something like the guard pattern. It's not particularly complicated. We can say, well, a loyalty club member can only do a thing if their membership's current. They might need a reward point balance. We can put a guard method onto our domain objects that allows us to give really complex, high quality reasons why an action may not be performed. This is really, really going to be helpful. But the fundamental principle here is that I can write a test for this, and this can run in process, in RAM, on a single machine. It'll run quickly. It's easy to reason about. And if I get it wrong, I'm much more likely to care about it because I'm much more likely to be able to fix it. If I push this to a build pipeline and I have to wait for an hour or a day or a month, I'm never going to care. So if we need something slightly more sophisticated, let's have a look at the guard pattern, which we can do in a minute. But the fundamental principle here, though, is the logic has to hold up. If I don't have to break into your system, right? I don't have to wander in and take your database. I don't have to look for remote code execution exploits. I don't have to do any of the proper black hat stuff if your system just gives the data away. We want to put logical constraints in so that we can say these things are only permissible under those circumstances, and our domain logic, which will test that for us, will hold those constraints to be true. However, there is a flip side. And this is where I put on my black hoodie and say, well, I don't have to break your logic if I can just drop Meterpreter in one of your boxes and exfil your entire database. So this is where infrastructure comes into play. Now, we're not going to talk too much in depth about infrastructure security. We've got a bunch of other speakers who are going to do a much better job than I will on that. I do want to say, though, a few things about how our domain modeling and security principles can play nicely with infrastructure security. So let's say, for instance, that we have found a vulnerability. We're going to have a bad day no matter what. We're already having a bad day, right? There's a CVE, it's been released. We've discovered that somebody else has got a remote code execution exploit, and it's in our systems right now. We've got to do something. What can we do? Okay, well, clearly we should patch it. Can we patch it? Do we know? Have we patched it? Do we know? Ugh, okay. Now, if this is in our infrastructure, what we should be able, let's say, for instance, there's a remote code execution in the Linux kernel, because that'd never happen. Windows kernel, maybe that'd never happen either. That's why you run all of your Docker containers on Linux, people, side note. But nonetheless, what we can do, though, is we can just patch the operating system, right? And we can redeploy all of our stuff. Except that if we have a really convoluted test suite to run, then I'm preaching to the choir here, we know that that's going to be really difficult. We have to spin up an entire VPC. We have to run all of our infrastructure just to run this little regression suite when our code hasn't even necessarily changed. Infrastructure as code is going to help, but if we're still not confident that our tests are going to catch anything that we've broken, then we can't really ship this thing. So we need our domain logic to be rock solid so that we can then say, look, if the tests pass, we're confident that this thing is able to be shipped to production. We know that we haven't introduced any logic errors into our business domain. We know that our security model is fine and it's helping us out, and our API gateway is just going to be shuttling packets backward and forward and doing some elementary checks on our auth tokens, which means we can safely upgrade our infrastructure. We can just bump our base AMI image. We can do all of those things that we'd otherwise look at and go, oh, gee, those servers haven't been patched in 3 years. They're probably vulnerable, but no one's noticed yet, right? Maybe no one will continue to notice. That'd be good. Infrastructure changes are scary because our app might break. But if our app is confidently able to be tested, our app's not going to break. But nobody here knows how to do that, do we? Surely there's a community of people who know how to do this somewhere. Maybe one day we'll find them. So I'm going to throw it open for a QA. This kind of talk normally prompts a whole lot more questions than normal, especially around things like ORMs and M+1s and God objects and so on. So I tend to leave a little bit more time for questions in these kinds of talks. But if you do only take one thing away from this talk, other than a need for coffee, it should be this. Your domain model needs to be the final arbiter of who can perform an action, when, and the conditions. Everything else is an optimization. It doesn't mean that it's a bad optimization. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Absolutely, you should be checking API tokens at your API gateway. You should just be saying, look, if they're authenticated, then they're allowed to call this thing. Maybe if they're authenticated and they can do this thing, or in that role, then they can do this thing. But you know what? I'm just going to pass on the fact that I know who they are and what roles they're in and a set of claims, and everything else can be taken care of by the application, which has its logic, which can be tested. Optimizations aren't bad. They're very good. They're very necessary, but don't rely on them for the correctness of our application. Everything else is an optimization. Your domain model has to be the guiding principle, the one final determinant of who can do what, when. The second single thing I'd like you to take away from this talk is that under pressure, good people do things that are familiar and easy, not unfamiliar and difficult. If you make it easy to write good tests, if you make it easy to run good tests, good people will write and run good tests. They will give you reliable outcomes. If you make it really difficult to release something, if you make it really difficult to test something, if you make them sign into 2 different cloud consoles just to figure out which API gateway gave them this weird token that's a little bit broken, they're not going to want to do it. We want to make the pit of success broad and deep so that people easily fall into it. Make the right thing to do the easy thing to do. Everybody wins. On that note, thank you. I'm going to throw the floor open to questions. I saw a couple of notes earlier. So questions. Nobody's asked me about N+1s yet.
So just a reminder, if you got questions, throw them out there into the chat with Umbrella, and Andrew will be more than happy to take those questions from you. We have a few minutes here to take questions. So if you've got something to ask, please throw that into the chat.
So while we're waiting for questions to come in, I see that there's one that's arrived already. While we're waiting for questions to come in, what I might do is I'll flick over to some of the terrible code that I wrote, and we can have a look at some of the logic. So in this case, what we've got is a customer class that's not particularly sophisticated. Okay. But you can see that they've actually got the beginnings of some state and some behavior here. Now, I'm relying on, in this case, a made-up ORM in .NET land. Obviously, we'd probably use something like Entity Framework. Obviously, in Java or Kotlin land, you'd probably still be using Hibernate. You can use a whole bunch of these. It doesn't really matter. What we're looking for, though, is persistence, ignorance being our friend rather than our enemy. The problem that we usually see when people begin bringing in an ORM is something like order collections. And we've seen an example of that a little bit earlier. So if I grab one of the tests here, what we can see is we're asserting in this particular test when a customer signs up, they start an order. So when a customer places an order, customer.orders should contain order. Now, DBAs are likely to freak when you show them this kind of code, because what you're saying to them is, I'm going to materialize 1 record followed by 1,000 records because I'm going to materialize this entire orders collection. Right? It's really important to note 2 things here. One, the database is subservient to our domain model. The database is an implementation detail of what we're trying to do, which is model the real world. 2, ORMs are not like they were in the early 2000s. ORMs are actually pretty good. An ORM, given a query like this or given an expression like this, is going to issue maybe 2, probably 1 queries. Probably only 1. In the case of VF, it's likely to be 2. It's going to fetch this, and then it's going to fetch all of these. And we want the details of these. It's still going to just do a left join, even if we pull in the order line items. So we need to rely on our ORMs. Treat the tools as our friend, not as our enemy. One of the other considerations that we were looking at, and this is a sneaky one, this bites people a lot. I'm going to flick back to one of these, which is the guard pattern. And specifically, now somebody would already have spotted this a little bit earlier. Put it in the chat if you have. Can I pay for my order with points? And the first question, the first precondition we're checking here is, well, is their membership current? Now, what's the problem with the word current? Because pretty much immediately, anybody who's written any code anywhere in a system that crosses time zones, they're going to go, we don't know what time it is. Right? We need to know what time it is. That introduces the concept of a service. We need to know what time it is, because we could call this method today, and we could call it tomorrow, and it may well be correct in giving us different answers. So that's easy, right? All we do, well, membership is current, it's just a dumb property, right? We can just hydrate the records from the database when the membership lapses, and then we can update them all and say, well, now it's not current anymore. And I guess you could do that, but we're hoping to have more than a handful of customers, and that's going to get really expensive if you've got a decent sized customer base. So what we can do instead is we can introduce the concept of providing a domain service to an entity at the point in time when it actually needs it to get an answer. So in this case, can I pay for an order with points? Here's the order. By the way, the time is this o'clock. Is my membership current? Can we pay it? What's the points balance? And so on. Where we end up is we actually end up passing some relatively trivial services into some of our methods, or we run our domain services earlier. So for instance, we have a clock service, and then we just pass in the result. So if we grab our clock service and then we say, okay, hey clock, what time is it? Okay, cool. Now, loyalty program member, can you pay for an order with points given that the time is blah? What that allows us to do is keep our components very, very functional. We can keep our guard methods effectively stateless and serviceless. They don't need services. They just get pure inputs and get pure outputs. So that's one of the normal issues that we tend to see with code like this. And where people tend to go wrong is they inject services into their domain entities and then they hold on to them for a very long time. So what you end up with is trying to serialize a database connection, or you end up with object disposed exceptions, or in the case of C++, you end up with segmentation faults because you try to dereference a pointer that's now been cleaned up. So maybe don't do it that way. But this pattern does have a lot of value. One of the things that we tend to find, though, is that when we start thinking in OO terms, we realize just how difficult a job we've created for ourselves by extracting so much of this logic into services that previously we thought were well factored. When we've pushed all this logic to outside, now we're in all sorts of strife because all of a sudden we're bossing these entities around from outside, but they're starting to have opinions about whether they're actually willing to undertake those kinds of actions themselves. So we end up in this kind of one foot in either camp territory where in some cases we've got services doing manipulation, and in other cases we've got the entities doing the manipulation of themselves. That's normal. It's actually not as bad as you think. Oftentimes, it's actually pretty easy to start refactoring a code base to this kind of pattern, and it pays off in spades. So I'm going to leave it there. If there are no more questions coming through the chat, then we'll call it a day.
You must have done that good a job. Nobody's got any additional questions. You explained it that well, I guess.
Either that or everybody's just gone to sleep because I was boring. We'll see what Twitter says.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate you being here with us. And with that, folks, we're going to take a short break. We're going to be off for about 15 minutes to give you a chance to interact with our sponsors, go check out their booths, interact with your peers here on the platform as well. And we will return about 11:30 Singapore time. So go get yourselves a drink, check out the sponsors, talk network, do all the wonderful things, and we'll see you back here really soon.
Hi, Simon from Sneak here. At Sneak, we specialize in dev-first security. And what that means is enabling developers properly to find and fix vulnerabilities both in your application's open source libraries and in your container images. You can come and find more at sneak.io. That's SNYK.io. Now, we since last year acquired DevSecCon. So at Sneak, it is our absolute privilege to be here and also to make sure we amplify and absolutely push DevSecCon to continue to be the premier DevSecOps event around the world. Come visit our virtual booth in the Brella application and come and talk to us about how you can enable your company to work in a dev-first security way. Thanks for listening and enjoy the conference.
Hi, I'm Matthias Madou, the co-founder and CTO at Secure Code Warrior. So we specialize in helping developers to ship secure code with confidence, and you can find us at www.securecodewarrior.com. So we are thrilled to support DevSecCon24 because we love to see this wonderful community coming together. and we want to be involved no matter what. So visit our virtual booth for more information. So that virtual booth includes some interactive activities, prizes, and challenges. See you there.
Hi, I'm Chris Weisopel, CTO and co-founder of Veracode. We specialize in application security for modern development pipelines. You can find us at veracode.com, that's VERACODE. We are happy to support DevSecCon24 because we believe application security experts and developers need to come together to secure modern software development. Come visit us at our virtual booth, speak with our AppSec experts about all things relating to secure development, and participate in our password program. Hope to see you there.
Detectify is a scalable web app security service that automates thousands of security tests to help you write safer code and release secure applications. Detectify's security scans are non-intrusive and can run safely in staging and production environments. Instead of performing version tests, Detectify checks your app using real exploits, simulating a hacker attack with harmless payloads. The service is continually updated with new security tests thanks to Detectify Crowdsource, a global community of security researchers. Detectify equips you with the tools you need to fix critical security issues. Getting started with Detectify only takes a couple of minutes. Just verify domain ownership, run your first scan, and access your first security report. So what are you waiting for? Fix vulnerabilities, build your security skill set, and release safer apps with Detectify. Go hack yourself and start your free trial at detectify.com.
Hi, this is Brandon Eyring with Zero North. I lead the sales development team. Thanks for joining us at DevSecCon24. The event, it's definitely a cool place for leaders in the development and security communities to get together, and the speakers and the topics are right on point. While you're here, feel free to stop by the Zero North virtual booth, get some information on the solutions that we offer, but don't take our word for it. Come see a demo for yourself and enter to win a cool prize. Thanks, and we'll see you there.
Hi, DevSecCon. My name is Heidi Waterhouse, and I work for LaunchDarkly. We're a company that does feature management or feature flags as a service. We have a virtual booth here, so if you'd like to stop by and see how that works out, we'd love to talk to you about it. I want to say that as you're thinking about security, I want you to think about how feature flags could actually make your security more effective and more cost effective, because I know that we're all thinking about how to do more with less. And one of the ways to do that is to make it really easy to control your features at a modular level. So stop by and talk to us about that, and we'll be happy to see you. Have a great conference, and I hope you get a lot of wonderful content out of it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Fernando Cardozo. I'm a Solutions Architect at Trend Micro, a global cybersecurity company and leader in cloud workloads protection. Join me on DevSecCon24 on June 15 for a 15-minute talk as I will outline the importance of cloud security posture management for cloud service and compliance. Demonstrate how you can quickly set up a CSPM solution and introduce it into your infrastructure as a code pipeline using security plugins in the VS Code or in the CI/CD pipeline. You don't want to miss it. Watch the live DevSecCon Conference 24 or click in the Trend Micro virtual booth to see our schedule for talks. Let's help organization with the DevSecOps culture. See you there.
Hey DevSecCon, what's up? My name is Idan Tendler, CEO and co-founder of Bridge Group. We help security engineers automate their public cloud security by streamlining remediation throughout the CI/CD. With our platform, you could scan for misconfigurations from your infrastructure as code to your runtime, but we also provide the fixes. So for each misconfiguration, you will find the fix delivered as code as pull request in the platform. We're super proud to be part of this event and to contribute back to DevSecCon and to the community. Come visit us at our virtual booth and also at bridgecrew.io, and you have to try the platform. It's for free. Have a wonderful day.
Hey, what's up, DevSecCon? Scott Gerlach, CSO and co-founder from StackHawk here. Big thanks to DevSecCon for letting us help sponsor. StackHawk is a dynamic application security testing tool built for developers. And when I say built for developers, I mean you can run it on your laptop, like your linter. You can run it in CI/CD. You can run it in staging. You can run it in pre-prod. Run it anywhere you want. We want you to be able to identify, find, and fix those problems before they become vulnerabilities. Please check us out at stackhawk.com. I hope your DevSecCon online is great. Thank you to DevSecCon for hosting a virtual event. It's awesome to be able to connect with our peers during social distancing time. I hope you find some great talks today and learn a bunch. When you're all done, check out stackhawk.com, sign up for early access, and get some scanning running. Have a great day.
And fix vulnerabilities both in your application's open source libraries and in your container images. You can come and find more at sneak.io. That's s.io. Now, we, since last year, acquired DevSecCon. So at Sneak, it is our absolute privilege to be here and also to make sure we amplify and absolutely push DevSecCon to continue to be the premier DevSecOps event around the world. Come visit our virtual booth in the Brella application and come and talk to us about how you can enable your company to work in a dev-first security way. Thanks for listening and enjoy the conference.
Hi, I'm Matthias Madou, the co-founder and CTO at Secure Code Warrior. So we specialize in helping developers to ship secure code with confidence, and you can find us at www.securecodewarrior.com. So we are thrilled to support DevSecCon24 because we love to see these wonderful community coming together, and we want to be involved no matter what. So visit our virtual booth for more information. So that virtual booth includes some interactive activities, prizes, and challenges. See you there.
Hi, I'm Chris Weisopel, CTO and co-founder of Veracode. We specialize in application security for modern development pipelines. You can find us at veracode.com, that's VERACODE. We are happy to support DevSecCon24 because we believe application security experts and developers need to come together to secure modern software development. Come visit us at our virtual booth, speak with our AppSec experts about all things relating to secure development, and participate in our password program. Hope to see you there.
Detectify is a scalable web app security service that automates thousands of security tests to help you write safer code and release secure applications. Detectify's security scans are non-intrusive and can run safely in staging and production environments. Instead of performing version tests, Detectify checks your app using real exploits, simulating a hacker attack with harmless payloads. The service is continually updated with new security tests thanks to Detectify Crowdsource, a global community of security researchers. Detectify equips you with the tools you need to fix critical security issues. Getting started with Detectify only takes a couple of minutes. Just verify domain ownership, run your first scan, and access your first security report. So what are you waiting for? Fix vulnerabilities, build your security skill set, and release safer apps with Detectify. Go hack yourself and start your free trial at detectify.com.
Hi, this is Brandon Eyring with Zero North. I lead the sales development team. Thanks for joining us at DevSecCon24, the event. It's definitely a cool place for leaders in the development and security communities to get together, and the speakers and the topics are right on point. While you're here, feel free to stop by the Zero North virtual booth, get some information on the solutions that we offer, but don't take our word for it. Come see a demo for yourself and enter to win a cool prize. Thanks, and we'll see you there.
Hi, DevSecCon. My name is Heidi Waterhouse, and I work for Launch Darkly. We're a company that does feature management or feature flags as a service. We have a virtual booth here, so if you'd like to stop by and see how that works out, we'd love to talk to you about it. I want to say that as you're thinking about security, I want you to think about how feature flags could actually make your security more effective and more cost effective, because I know that we're all thinking about how to do more with less. And one of the ways to do that is to make it really easy to control your features at a modular level. So stop by and talk to us about that, and we'll be happy to see you. Have a great conference, and I hope you get a lot of wonderful content out of it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Fernando Cardoso. I'm Solutions Architect at Trend Micro, a global cybersecurity company and leader in cloud workloads protection. Join me on DevSecCon24 on June 15 for a 15-minute talk as I will outline the importance of cloud security posture management for cloud service and compliance. Demonstrate how you can quickly set up a CSPM solution and introduce it into your infrastructure as a code pipeline using security plugins in the VS Code or in the CI/CD pipeline. You don't want to miss it. Watch the live DevSecCon Conference 24 or click in the Trend Micro virtual booth to see our schedule for talks. Let's help organization with the DevSecOps culture. See you there.
Hey DevSecCon, what's up? My name is Idan Tendler, CEO and co-founder of Bridge Group. We help security engineers automate their public cloud security by streamlining remediation throughout the CI/CD. With our platform, you could scan for misconfigurations from your infrastructure as code to your runtime, but we also provide the fixes. So for each misconfiguration, you will find the fix delivered as code as pull request in the platform. We're super proud to be part of this event and to contribute back to DevSecCon and to the community. Come visit us at our virtual booth and also at bridgecrew.io, and you have to try the platform. It's for free. Have a wonderful day.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We're going to get our next speaker up here for you. Sarah Young is our next speaker. She's an Azure security architect. She's based in Melbourne, but travels all over speaking at conferences and helping her customers secure their cloud environments and so forth. So we're going to bring Sarah in here and let her get started with her presentation. Sarah, with that, it is all yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a good day or evening, no matter where you are in the world. Thank you for joining me today. So today I'm going to talk to you about security operations in a cloud native environment. And yeah, the tagline is collection is not detection, because it's a fun little, it's rhymes, and I have a sticker of it, which I'll show you later, and it's very cute. But just real quick, obviously, I've just been introduced, but who am I? I'm an Azure security architect. I live in Melbourne, which is the colder and wetter bit of Australia, but I'm actually currently in New Zealand. So yeah, thanks COVID and border closures for that. At some point, I believe I'll get to go back to Australia. I really love dogs. That dog on the picture there is not me. It is not mine. It is my parents. I live vicariously through her. One day when I don't travel, I'll definitely get one. In a prior life, I used to be a network and a VoIP engineer, and now I do all kinds of cloud security stuff, including, of course, security operations. I'm a prolific user of GIFs or GIFs. We're not even going there during this. We're not going there. Whatever you want to call them is fine by me. And memes in my presentations. If they're a little bit obscure, I'll probably explain them. It depends if you have my sense of humor. But if you've ever seen one of my presentations before, you probably already know that. But what am I actually talking about today? I want to talk about security operations, because we talk about DevSecOps. And we talk about, and lots of people talk about putting security into development, which of course is really important. And I myself have talked on that subject many times before. But we need to look, we sometimes forget that we also aren't going to get rid of what would more traditional security operations. So I'm going to look at why those types of security operations are important. Give you a recap of just how we looked at that stuff on premise or kind of in our traditional environment. What, who, how, when, how do we actually do this? And then I'm going to talk, lastly, about use cases. We really need to talk about use cases, let me tell you. Now, on the right there, if you're not familiar with that dog is called Tofu. He lives in Melbourne. He's a really cute Sheba, and he does feel-good motivational videos. If you need something to cheer you up, I definitely recommend you go check him out on YouTube. I'm not sponsored by him in any way, shape, or form. I just think he's adorable. And he recently did a video where he was hacking, so I had to add it in to my talk. So, might sound like a stupid question to anyone who already works in security, and any of you who are probably listening to this presentation, you probably at least have a vested interest or do security yourself. So maybe saying, why is security operations important, seems like a stupid question, but there's a reason I wanted to cover that at the beginning of this talk. Just before we go any further, I think sometimes there's a lot of misinformation about what security operations does. Now, you've probably seen many forms of this meme before. I couldn't find a specific security operations one, so I went for this general InfoSec one. As you know, what my parents think I do, I'm a hacker. What users think I do, just break things. What society thinks I do, it's a guy with a balaclava, of course. What IT managers think I do, just burn money. And what I actually do is probably sit around and work with my colleagues. Granted, at the current state, in the current state of the world, we're doing that remotely, not in person. But I think that the important point here is that there is, I think, a fundamental misconception about what security operations is for sometimes. And as I was saying at the beginning, when we're moving into DevSecOps and shifting right and using all those buzzwords, we still do need that incident response and security monitoring side of things, albeit it might be done a little bit differently. I do keep meaning to make a security operations one, because I couldn't find one on Google. If anyone finds one, please tell me, because I would love to see it. But look, here are some, I mean, I've just picked some random random articles here. In fact, most of this was containers and Kubernetes stuff, but why should you care? Because we know that there are breaches happening all the time. You know, we say now you should assume breach. You shouldn't just If you don't think you've been breached, the chances are you have been breached, but you just don't know about it. So, why should you care? Every organization, no matter whether you're big or small or whatever you do, you need to care about security operations, because you will have been owned, or your users will have been owned in some way, shape, or form. I just picked these ones randomly off the internet when I was making the slide, but I know that every single one of you will be able to think of a high-profile breach that's happened. And of course, at the moment, in the current environment, we're seeing more breaches, things around, or we're seeing people use tactics around COVID and things like that. So whenever we find a way to mitigate a certain type of attack, attackers are developing and changing their methods, or they're altering them to adapt to what's going on in the world. As I said, there's a lot of COVID related scams and threats going around at the moment. I know personally, and you can, I'm not sure what you've experienced yourself. I know personally, I've had many COVID related phishing type emails offering me PPE and hand sanitizer and things like that. And I'm pretty sure they're not legitimate websites. But again, they use these things to play into people's fears. So security operations is still really important. And of course, now with more people working from home, when that security operations is becoming even more distributed, as in, we are an organization's security operations are starting to sort of work its way into people's homes as well, when we used to be quite office focused. So there's so many different things here. And this shouldn't be anything new to you, but I think sometimes sometimes we need to refocus on it a little bit. This is from Microsoft Security Threat Intel. It's just to give you an idea of what the kind of attack surface at the moment. So these prices are in US dollars. You can see, and it just gives you an idea of actually how inexpensive it is to attack people. So you don't necessarily need to be a state-sponsored actor. You don't have to be a huge, large criminal syndicate. It is relatively cheap to go on the dark web, procure tools, and run attacks. So an exploit kit, maybe about $1,400 a month. 0 days. Now, a lot of people are worried about 0 days, and rightly so, because 0 days have no mitigation, or at least initially they don't have any mitigation. But in fact, the cost to develop one, it goes from about $50,000 up to, I don't know, 3.5 million. So there's only particular types of attackers that can actually have the resource and the money to develop those. But if you look at things like ransomware, that only costs $66 up front. And strange phrasing, I know, you can basically get ransomware as a service, which means that you can go on the dark web and pay someone to do the ransomware for you, and then they effectively clip the ticket and take some of your profit. If we keep going around there, you can see DDoS costs just under $800 a month. Compromised accounts, of course, are very cheap. And if you've ever looked at a website called Have I Been Pwned, and put your email in, no doubt one of your emails that you use in your everyday life will have been in some kind of breach. And if you use the same username and password, both in any more than one place, and it's compromised in one place, then basically your username and password combination is out on the dark web for someone to buy and potentially use. Now, if we were all in person, I would be asking if anybody wanted to admit that they use the same username and password combination in real life. Obviously, I can't do that, but I'm pretty sure that most of you have done that at some point during your lives. Hopefully, you're all getting rid of it now, because you're all good, responsible security professionals. But again, the point here is just to see, it doesn't take much. And you may know as well, I only discovered this recently, that if you, a really common attack by teenagers is when they're playing online gaming systems. There are DDoS solutions that cost a couple of dollars, and they go and DDoS their rivals in Fortnite or whatever it is, Call of Duty, etc. So, the environment is so easy. It's so easy to get attacked. So this is why, we really need to be concerned, and not just about the big, scary 0 days. It's the more common attacks which actually are, more prevalent in the environment. So typical security operations issues. these, again, are not new. Too many disconnected products. Many people will say to you, this is a single pane of glass. You can just do everything from this one console. That's very rarely true. It's very difficult to have all your different products talk to each other, especially if you're running a large, complex enterprise environment and you have lots of different vendors. Not enough SOC analysts. Now, that, again, it doesn't matter on the size of your organization, whether you're big or small. Well-trained SOC analysts are hard to come by. And so whether you're a big organization that needs 100 or you're a smaller organization that needs 5, it can still be hard to actually fill those seats, which of course means that the load on your other SOC analysts is increased. Environments are definitely getting more complex. I mean, if you're looking at moving to the cloud, most businesses are not 100% cloud, even Microsoft isn't. So you've often got a hybrid environment where you'll have some on-premise, you have something in the cloud, you may even have more things in the cloud as well, or in a different cloud. So environments are getting more and more complex, and to maintain monitoring and visibility over that is a real challenge. Most SOCs also depend on manual processes. Now, going forward, it's great. We've got automation, which I will talk about later. But, you know, a lot of SOCs, if you've ever worked in a SOC, you probably know that there are some quite time-consuming manual processes that they have to do to correlate things or try and verify false positives, etc. And that can be really time-consuming. And combined with not enough staff, it can mean that a lot of alerts go unanswered or unaddressed. Some recent research, and I forget the source, so I apologize to the source that I read this from, but something like 45% of SOC alerts are never acknowledged, typically, which is actually quite a lot. And again, this is just because of the being able to scale thing. And lastly, too many alerts. You know, we get false positives in security operations. You're always going to get false positives. The idea is to reduce them as much as you can, but you're never going to completely eliminate the risk that a false positive is going to occur, and your SOC analysts, of which you don't have many of anyway, will spend far too long looking at something that turns out to not be an issue. And you know, this is kind of a circle that goes around. And these issues still exist in the modern environment too, but they haven't really changed. So how we can address them has changed, but generally the actual problems are still the same. I think my Simpsons gif is fairly obvious there. I have to talk about single pane of glass. Many people talk about single pane of glass. In my time in security, it is pretty difficult to get there. It's not impossible, but it is very, very challenging. I think most businesses realistically should aim for maybe as few panes of glass as possible. It's certainly not practical for a SOC analyst to look through, I don't know, 10, 15 portals. And I have seen things like that. And you should be trying to reduce it maybe to 2 or 3. And if you can get to 1, perfect. But I just sort of have to kind of shatter the single pane of glass thing, because it's very difficult to achieve. And if anybody has, and you want to tell me about it at the end, I would love to hear, because well done you if you've done it. But my point is, don't beat yourself up if you can't get there immediately, or even if you never quite get there, because you know it's very tricky. It really is. It's an ideal state that not many can get to. Another problem is silos. And this is, again, a problem that's wider than just in security operations. But as my talk is about security operations, what we find is an attacker isn't going to just look at one particular part of your organization. So if you've got your Wintel team, if you've got your identity team, if you've got your cloud team, that's great. But if someone breaches your environment, like, they're not going to look through, they're not just going to stay in your little silo that fits with your organizational structure. And it can make security operations people, it can make their job very difficult. I don't know, this is what came up on Giphy for silos. I thought it was quite funny, but I think it's the US team, Olympics team for something. Beg your pardon, US team. I don't know, can't remember specifically what you were. But, you know, we can see here that an attacker will go across all of these different silos, and they don't care. You know, I have a sticker which I should have got out onto my desk right now, so I could have put it up to the camera. If you follow me on Twitter, you may have seen it before. Anyway, it says, "That's out of scope," said no attacker ever. Because unlike a pen tester or unlike anything else, you know, an attacker is just going to go through your environment and take and destroy or infiltrate whatever they can. Like, they don't care. So these silos, they're not great from an organizational and operational perspective anyway, but they really, really do not help security operations, because an attacker is just going to go across the whole thing. And if your security operations is put into different silos as well, that can be really, really difficult, because if you can only look at your identity, if you can only look at your endpoint, if you can only look at your applications, you can't correlate what's going on. So it's really, really important that we try and get rid of this. And this is a hallmark of traditional security operations, that this was often a very big challenge. So, by the way, if anybody wants stickers, feel free. I'm going to show you some more pictures coming up. Feel free to DM me on Twitter. New Zealand has post offices open, and I'm always happy to cheer someone up by sending you some security stickers. But how did we do security operations on premise then? So this is the really, really cheesy analogy, but it still holds true even today, which is the castle and the big walls and the moat. So when we did security operations on premise, we were very focused on taking information from the network, particularly the external perimeter. So firewalls, anything that was in the DMZ, etc. And a lot of our detections and how we picked up strange behavior was based on the network. But again, inherently, the problem with this model, of course, is that if the attackers did manage to breach the perimeter and say got in undetected, there wasn't nearly as much detection and logging like within the environment itself. So that potentially was a gap. And like I said, I have talked about this analogy to death in other talks, and I'm sure you've heard the castle moat analogy, but we do need to remember that although taking from the network is important, I'd never tell anyone to not take from it. There's still a lot of value that you can get from logging certain types of network events. You know, we do need to be looking at detection at all layers of the stack going forward. So the other thing that we also used to be very big on, and this still does, this mindset is still around today as well, is coming back to the title of my presentation, is collection is not detection. Now, certainly the traditional mindset for security operations was collect all the things. Every single log you could get, collect it, put it in your SIEM. But we know that a lot of these logs, no one ever ran detections on them, nor did they do proactive hunting on them. And then really, if you're not doing any of those things, is it really worth collecting them? Now, obviously, that is an individual business's final decision to make themselves. But I would always say to you, if you're looking at your security operations, like look at the types of logs you're collecting. Are you actually doing anything with them? Because if you're not, you know, why are you collecting them? Or at least why are you putting them into a SIEM? Because if it's going in SIEM, if it's on-prem, of course, an on-prem SIEM will eventually run out of space, and it degrades the performance as it gets over full. And if you're using a cloud-based SIEM, then of course you're typically paying per gig or whatever ingestion charge. So you'll be spending more money, but not really getting anything out of it. So, you know, definitely, please rethink your collection strategy. Don't just put things in for the sake of it. Again, if we were in person, I would happily have given everyone one of these stickers. Again, if you want one, DM me on Twitter. I'm sure I can sort you out. And as you can see, essentially, as per the cat lady, we don't want to be crazy hoarders and just have, well, this lady has millions of cats, but you know, we don't want to just spend money and hoard lots and lots and lots of logs. Don't ask me why I went for cats and logs. Basically, if I run out of ideas, I typically go for cats. So yeah, there's cat lady. So next, let's talk a little bit about, I've basically talked about the problems that we have, the challenges, and how we used to do it, but what should we do going forward? So when you're doing your modern SecOps, you've basically got a choice. Assuming most organizations now are looking at least moving some of their workloads into a cloud environment, you've got to kind of make a choice how you want to sort of have a focus for your modern SecOps. You could go fully cloud. You could do hybrid, so you could have some of your security operations done with on-prem systems, some of it done in the cloud, or you could still stay completely on-prem. And for that number 2, the hybrid, that could be like an interim stay, or it could be something that stays permanently. To be honest with you, a lot of businesses, if you've got an on-prem SIEM that you've spent a lot of money, invested a lot of time in, I wouldn't expect anybody to just say, right, we're getting rid of that tomorrow. I don't think that's really realistic. But certainly, if you're doing, as many businesses are and organizations are now doing, a cloud first journey, then it does make sense to, as your workloads go into a cloud, they would be connected up to a cloud-based SIEM and cloud-based monitoring tools. And then probably in time, you might want to phase out the on-premise stuff. But again, I can't tell you, there's such a wide range of businesses and industries in the world. What you need to do there is going to really depend on your business. But I guess all I'm saying is make a conscious choice about what you're going to do, because what we often find as well is that it can be harder. Cloud, and I've worked with a number of different clouds. Getting cloud logs into an on-premise SIEM. Again, I'm not even naming particular platforms here. There's no need, because it seems to be a very general rule. It can be quite challenging to get them in and get them being processed. Again, that's more of like a legacy technology and a more modern technology compatibility thing more than anything. So please, like, at least think about what you're doing in this space. What should you collect? Because I know I've just told you, please don't collect everything. Be mindful of what you're collecting. But really what I'm saying here is you need to collect logs from your entire application stack. So not just your infrastructure. If you're using like containers, Kubernetes, not just your orchestrator, not the pods, not just the application. This is still going towards defense in depth. So having detections and protections at every layer of the stack. So that's your identity, it's your virtual machine, it's your application, it's down at the physical layer, it's down at the network layer. And when we're moving into these hybrid environments, some of this might be done by a cloud provider as well. So I guess it's more about mapping that out and understanding. And every time you can take a log, ask yourself, what will we do with this log? What is it? What detections can we actually configure on it? Or what, if we wanted to do hunting through the environment, what could we find using these logs? Because make sure the log has value. Otherwise, you probably don't need to add it. So then looking at, by the way, this, I just realized I didn't explain this. This is what I got for hoarding, another hoarding GIF. The hoarding GIFs, apparently you do not get very many of them on Giphy. So there you go. So, I've talked about this in other presentations before I've done about moving to cloud and modernizing your security, but you need to relook at the security tools that you may be already ingesting security visibility or security logs from. Will they get you the visibility you need in the cloud and in your hybrid environment? So when I talk about security operations and visibility tools, like we're talking about things like vulnerability scanning. Of course, I've talked a lot about SIEM already, runtime security, auditing, policy tools, image repositories. All of these things will generate logs that could be of use. But you need to make sure that they're actually giving you the visibility you need. You basically need to, some tools that you've used on premise will probably be fine, or they may just need an add-on. Some of them you may need to change altogether. Again, I can't give you specific guidance. I can't sort of concretely tell you what you do and don't need. It's very much going to be context dependent, but the idea is that I'm just giving you some things to think about. And last thing, today is definitely not the day to talk about paid versus OSS open source tools, because that is a big topic in itself. You can get some great open source tools out there, but again, whether or not they do what you need, typically they may need a bit more maintenance or engineering work to be able to use them. This is probably not the day for that, but again, just have these as points, you know, the kind of things you should be looking at when you're assessing what you want to do. And then when should you be doing security operations? This should be obvious, but the only reason I picked this was because of the little dude who I forget his name shouting, you should be doing it all the time. So, you know, you need to be doing security operations throughout your entire life cycle. Now, this is getting more back into the DevSecOps side of things, but from integrating security into development, which is great, that information that you're building and that visibility you're giving should be being fed into your security operations team. So from creating something to storing it, to deploying it, to its runtime and then tear down, we should be able to see all of those things because attackers are always finding new ways to do things. So if you don't understand what's going on in your environment, you can't possibly understand what's normal. If you don't understand what's normal, you can't start to understand what's abnormal. Now, this is a huge task, and it's really easy for me to sit here talking to my laptop on my webcam, telling you, I know I've worked in internal security teams. This is a huge challenge, but at least, you know, start, and it's a journey for everybody, but at least, you know, by having these talking points and starting to think about it, you can start to move your way there. So the last thing I want to talk about is use cases. Now, I've got a thing at the moment about writing clickbait titles. So if you want your top security operations hack from me, understand your use cases. Now, the only bullet point I've put, as you can see 3 times, is understand your use cases. And the reason for this is I can't stress enough how important this is. You can definitely get detections and typical use cases in a general, you know, anybody who uses cloud or anybody who uses a certain type of product. A lot of vendors might suggest some recommended detections and use cases, but you know, every business's use case will be different. And in order to do proper assessments, if you're starting to modernize your SecOps, if you don't understand your use cases, it's going to be really difficult to justify what you're doing. So if I give you an example, so say you're a business and you need to know, I don't know, if you need to know that, you know, that all your users, because this is quite relevant at the moment, if any of your users log in the country that they're currently not, try and log in to your corporate environment from a place where they don't normally work. Because of course, at the moment, we wouldn't expect to see employees probably moving around the world very much. Now, if that's something that you need in your business, then of course, then you know how to write your detection. You can say, hey, we want a rule that says if somebody logs in outside of their standard country, we want to raise that as a security issue. Now, then you can work back from your use case and say, okay, in order to build this detection, what logs do I need? How do I do that? And of course, you can start relating it as well to MITRE ATT&CK tactics, etc. And of course, moving further up the chain, if you need to justify new tools, or you need to justify why you need to ingest certain logs or take certain log sources or get some more visibility, being able to do this mapping and explaining is so important from a management perspective, because you can say, you know, I need this, and this is why I need it. It helps address these kind of attacks, and we need this specifically for our environment because of X, Y, Z. And you've got full traceability and mapping. And this doesn't, not very many businesses do this. It sounds really basic, but not a lot of businesses do this and understand their use cases. And whilst it's a time-consuming operation, I'm not denying that at all. It is so valuable and will make a lot of these things that I've talked about and starting these activities so much easier if you do it. So I can't stress enough, please understand your use cases. Please, please, please. It will make me very, very happy. So in conclusion then, I've only scratched the surface of this topic, right? This is a huge thing. I do talk to customers and people I work with about this all day, every day. And, I've only got 35 minutes to talk to you about it. But, in conclusion, obviously we couldn't do a security operations talk without having everyone's favorite security related, this is fine, GIF in here. But security operations is really hard. It's always been really hard. We have some great tools in the modern environment going into sort and automating things and being able to really get the false positive rate much better. But in order to do that, people need to understand their environments, which of course is the tricky thing because our environments are getting way more complicated. So, I can't even profess to say I've barely even scratched the surface of this topic right now because it's so difficult. But it's a journey for everyone. Please think about, especially when you're starting to transform your infrastructure, transform your enterprise environment, don't forget SecOps. People do. That needs to be looked at as well. And obviously there's a ton of resources online. Obviously feel free to hit me up directly on Twitter or whatever. It's one of my favorite topics. And I'm going to leave it there and see if you have any questions because, like I said, could go on about this forever, but I'm conscious of time. So thank you for having me, DevSecCon. It's been a pleasure. For those of you who are listening, I really hope you enjoyed it and that was useful and it gave you some things to think about. And yeah, that's me. And thanks very much. I'm not sure if people will talk for questions or they're in the chat window. Or if
I think Alyssa's audio is gone. That's why you can't hear her. Oh, there she is. She's back.
Oh, hello. I apologize. I'm sitting here talking to myself. Gosh, this is as bad as like a Zoom. Let me try that again. So everyone else can hear. To what extent can we trust SOAR tools to help address these concerns?
Oh, so SOAR tools are really good. SOAR tools, I think the hardest thing about SecOps is that we can't, it's the same in security, right? Nothing's 100%. SOAR tools can massively reduce your workload. So, but they're only going to reduce your workload for standard things that you can say write some automation for. So if you've got an alert that pops up in your environment that you know is benign, you can clear it out with automation. Or if it's just an error that needs fixing and you see it time and time again, SOAR is great for getting rid of repeatable things. But the more complex things that are obviously going to come up, at least from time to time, I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we can get, that we're going to completely remove humans from it. So I know some people sometimes get scared thinking SOAR is going to completely get rid of the people out of SecOps. I don't believe that at all. It's just going to stop people. Well-implemented SOAR should just make security analysts, SOC analysts' lives easier because they won't have to deal with the monotonous manual stuff. And it can also help just make their jobs easier. So for things that might be a little bit more complicated, you could still have some automation to do the repeatable tasks, like fetch IP, fetch more information from other places. And so they can concentrate on the stuff that's actually interesting and different. So I think SOAR is great. And I would definitely encourage you to use it because it's not going to get rid of people. It's just going to make people's lives who work in security operations more interesting, I think. That's my opinion anyway.
Awesome. Well, you actually touched on the answer to another question that we had. So I'm going to send you a different one then. This one comes from Megan. Her question has to do with talking to leadership within an org. Can you provide any tried and true strategies to start improving SecOps?
Oh, tried and true. I mean, the obvious tried and true one, of course, I'm sure you know, is usually if a company gets breached, they normally have a lot more focus on SecOps. But of course, that's not, and this has been, you know, the eternal security person struggle. Of course, it's a bit late then if you've already been breached. I think nowadays that conversation is definitely becoming easier. Just by merit of the fact that security breaches, large-scale security breaches have happened to many big name companies out there, and it's all hit, and lots of it's hit the media, and you know, executives and leadership can see, you know, the negative impact that has, whether it's in terms of your share price or your customer confidence, etc. So I don't think it's as a harder discussion as it used to be, but I definitely think specifically for security operations, you, as I was talking about in the use cases, and again, this might be a little bit too in-depth for high-level leadership, but certainly using real-world cases and illustrating what's happened in terms of, you know, the loss of revenue or the loss of customer confidence, etc., is really helpful. But also just you know, explaining, it's always difficult when it's leadership, but I think always going back to that reputational, you know, ultimately businesses exist, most organizations exist to well, commercial organizations exist to make money. Maybe if you're government, you know, obviously you don't want, you need the public to trust you. So I think it's an easier conversation than it was, but I think certainly showing, and an interesting one now is looking at some companies, not all, are now being more open about their breaches. Microsoft worked with a company in Scandinavia. They were very open about a breach that happened, and we helped them resolve that. And this is all public. And I think like helping leadership see those and see all the effort that goes into having to remediate it in terms of the time, the money, is a good way to position saying, hey, we should try and stop this happening in the first place, or at least minimize it, which is why we need to invest in our security operations. And there are definitely other companies out there. It's still not the norm. I'm hoping it will become more normal that companies who have been completely owned are actually sharing their stories publicly and being much more open. And I think that'll be great if that continues, because it's really, it's going to help people realize how prevalent this is. Because of course, at the moment, if you get breached, a lot of businesses and organizations don't really want to talk about it. So some leadership will still think it's not a problem. I think we largely got past the "this won't happen to us" mentality, but maybe not quite yet. That was a very long answer, so
that's all right. So yeah, another question comes from Taj. Taj asks, how can you go about making a decision on what to log?
Oh, if I had a magic wand for that, or if I had $1 for every time people ask me that, it's really difficult, right? It's, you know, and this is why there is no one, there's no one like definitive source that says if you log all of these things, you'll be fine, because it's impossible to create that, because each business has different things. What I would recommend you do is, particularly if you're using cloud, all of your infrastructure providers will often give you guidance about the kind of things you should log. They say maybe as a bare minimum, we'd start with this. Certainly, I know no vendor's going to give you, like, again, they're not going to categorically say you must do this, don't bother doing this. No one will ever do that because they can't. But certainly, you know, take recommendations from whoever, you know, your vendors for your tools, your infrastructure, your platforms. But then again, I would say go back to your use cases. You know, what are the biggest threats in your organization, or what does your organization consider the biggest risks? And from that, you can say, okay, so, you know, it might be you have like 10 critical applications. So for those 10 critical applications, you might want to log everything they do. everything because they are so critical, whereas for other ones you might not need to be so prescriptive. But yeah, it's a really difficult, time-consuming process, and I think it's one of those things that businesses struggle with, because it's time consuming and you need to understand the business and everything's changing. So I think, again, cheesy, I know, but it's a journey. But I think taking those bare minimums, recommendations from your vendors, and then talking to your technology risk people and doing that threat modeling and understanding, what would have the biggest impact if this part of the enterprise got owned, which part would have the most impact on the business negatively. Maybe you want to prioritize that. I think that's the best way to go about it, but it's certainly very challenging, I know.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sarah. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. There's a few more questions that people were asking. I don't know if you have a chance to pop in the chat after this, maybe.
Yeah, I'll pop in the chat, no problem.
Yeah, otherwise, hopefully they can find you on Twitter or something as well and ask their questions there. But yeah, terrific presentation. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for being a part of it tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a good rest of your day or evening, everyone.
All right, take care.
Thanks.
All right, and with that, folks, we're going to take a really short break while we turn over speakers. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes. All right, DevSecCon, we are back and we're ready to bring in our next speaker. Aravind is with us and he is currently a developer advocate at Elastic. And he's going to talk to you today about microservices and some of the struggles of gaining visibility into those environments and how we can do better. So with that, Aravind, I'm going to turn it over to you. Go ahead. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Elisa, and thanks DevSecCon24 organizers in helping putting this together. It's been a great experience throughout, and I look forward to enjoy the other talks as well. So that being said, and welcome to the session today. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or for people who are joining from different parts of the world. And I hope you have a great day. Today, we're going to look about building an observable infrastructure and code. So specifically talking about how would you bring up a cloud platform where you're running something like a microservice app, and then like collect logs, metrics, and traces, all from a practitioner perspective and also from a developer perspective. So initially, what we'll do is like we'll quickly create a Elastic Stack cluster. I'll explain because this is just to save the time, so that like we have enough time to talk about all of these things. Yeah, I'm trying to deploy it in the place where I live in mostly, and then like kind of click create deploy. That's it. And also we're gonna do all things on GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine. So I already have a script so that I don't mistype and like we don't spend time debugging things. So I already have a Cloud Shell here, which is like a Google CLI shell. I'll just create a demo cluster, and again like let the time take it, and like we can come back, and when we are up for demo, we'll start with a simple thing. Okay, that brings us to the session. And hello, welcome again. And I'm Arvind, and I work at Elastic as a developer advocate. And I do many things. I run meetups. I help the local developer communities in India and Southeast Asia. Like pretty much all the community stuff activities that I do. If you want to reach out, it's my website and where you can read some blogs and also the Twitter ID. So I want to take the session in a different format than the usual one, because usually when we talk about observability, infrastructure, getting logs, and a lot of these, we generally look at from a like theory perspective. There are many good definitions. There are many bookish definitions which also like are quite deep in explaining the terminology and explaining everything. So I'm trying to take a different sort of a perspective wherein what it is for me, if I am a developer, if I am a practitioner, what it is for me. So specifically, why do you want to do something like an observability or gaining visibility into microservices? Because as a developer, we want less bugs. We want our software to be reliable, running all the time without even complaining it. This is the perfect zero condition, right? Like this is the ideal condition that every developer expects their code to perform. At the same point of time, once I deliver or once I put my code and once I'm done with it, as a practitioner, as a person who is looking after the health of the systems, as a DevOps practitioner or as a security practitioner, so I want all the systems to function well. I want everything to be operationally looked after, so that whenever there is a need to collect metrics, I should be able to deliver value, not just from dashboards, but anything that I should be able to do with the data. And then if I am an InfoSec person, if I'm someone who is in the security and who looks after the overall organizational protection, like say if you are a SaaS company and building a SaaS service, and then you would need to protect the customer's data, also the interest of the organization. So then if you are a DevOps, if you are a security practitioner, and then like you need to secure and protect the data of your platform as well as the customer's data, a lot of these things. And then like if you are a product owner, like maybe a supervisor, as somebody who is managing a team, and then you might want to look after the product performance. You might want to see, okay, I want to find out how much does this page takes to load, or what are the problems between the team, how we can improve this processes. So all of these are the problems that we could potentially address using the single, building an observable infrastructure and code. Now, quickly going through, I don't have much slides, but I quickly want to get into demo. But I want to tell you how. Like generally, when people talk about how, it's simple, right? It's like collect all the data. But what people are collecting and what are the different things that people do and what is per se in a way that observability tells you. So usual scenario, you have a tool for collecting your traces. APM is nothing but application performance monitoring. You collect your real user monitoring traces, you collect your transaction performance, you do code tracing, which is very, very interesting. And you also can capture errors very interestingly. We'll see one error today, and we'll see how we can capture that. And then you also have service level availability metrics, which is again another important angle to this entire data collection, wherein if you want to know, if you have like say 10 microservices, like 10 is very less nowadays, but then if you have 10 microservices and you want to understand which microservice or which service of yours is down, it's like your own personal status page, and then like find out the response time of all of these. Like that is another way to look at. And then obviously metrics, like different sort of metrics from your cloud platforms, from your whatsoever infrastructure that you are running, your cloud services that you are specifically looking at, or even more and more, in like hardware level metrics also you might collect. And the most favorable and like people generally do is start from here, not from here, they start from logs. And then you also have logs, different types of logs, your logs from your application servers, your logs from your databases, your custom application logs, or the logs that are generated by some React app which is in the browser, and a lot of these things. So there are multiple angles to it, multiple data points and dimensions that you want to like really look forward. But do you also observe that there is one common thing in all of these? The time is a common perspective, but what happens is like people generally, what I have looked at, there are multiple tools and doing individual things, and there is a one common incident management tool or one common like even Slack, right? They push all the notifications to Slack and discuss as a team and like put a fix back together. And so this is one such solution to kind of like think of, but people are using different tools. But the time is a common factor among all of this. You have the time, which is that's why it's also called as time series data. You have timestamp in each one of this data, and then which can be correlatable. So what do we have here? Like how do we do that? So specifically, if you unify all of this data into one platform, and then the ability to look at your system and query at any point of time and understand the internal status of the system, like the system as a whole, is nothing, or like the unification of all these things is nothing but observability. So observability is like, if I have to put it in very simple manner, your logs, metrics, traces, all your operational data structured in a proper format. Like, of course, there is a format. I'll also mention why format is very important here. And then you have time as a common way, and like you can unify all of this, and all your teams can do this analysis pretty easily and do all of this. I didn't add security or more into that area, but we'll also see a bit of it at the end in the session. So again, what frameworks and tools? Like I understand that all of this is there, but maybe what are there in the obviously, many people use Elasticsearch for logs. It's a popular open source storage engine, and people ship logs. But then also, when you got into this Kubernetes ecosystem, the Kubernetes is the undisputed leader in the container orchestration ecosystem. And then you have this the tracing solution called Jaeger. Sorry for the black eyes, because I have the slides as back, so that's why you have the Jaeger with a black eye. But Jaeger is a tracing system, and then you can collect traces from the application. This is another tool too. There are many tracing tools which I also mentioned today. And you have Prometheus. Prometheus is a metrics store, and then you can collect metrics from your microservices. Prometheus can also be an individual store, and then you can collect data from all of this, etc. So you can do that as well. And then you also have several other tracing methodologies, like Zipkin is one another tracing methodology, which is quite popular. I believe Twitter also used Zipkin at some point, but there are more and more popular ones, more maturity coming in this area. Then you also have open tracing. Open tracing is an API or a library-based mode wherein like you can ship data in that particular format, and then like the tracing happens. And then you have the more like the upcoming one, or like the more popular open telemetry, like which has a lot of collectors, which collects data from your thing, and it's also vendor agnostic, and that means like you can ship data across your place. And then obviously, like in the company Elastic, the company that I work, we also have Beats, which is like a data shipper, which ships data, like all types of data, like like logs, metrics, audit data, and different sort of data. Beats is a lightweight data shipper. Then we have our own APM agents, like it's another open source project, and then through which you can also collect application traces. The cool thing here is like you could also stream all the data to APM server, and it can still understand all of this, and like it can stream back to Elasticsearch. Even if open telemetry, you can do that. So, but then, right, when we think of putting all the data in one single place, or when we try to collate all the data, each trace or each framing or each algorithm, what it does is it ships and stores data in a different schema. Obviously, right, everyone has their own structure. It's not like all the projects are working together. They have their own good way of solving the problems, right? So how do you solve that particular problem? Even as a company, and when we have several open source projects, and using different techniques to solve the unique problems to that particular domains. For example, we have a search project, where is the PDFs or files or different sort of data, non-time series data is ingested into the search product, and it ships data to Elasticsearch in a different format. The same JSON, but it's shipped in a different format. Then you also have Beats, which ships a wide variety of data. You have 7 beats, I believe: file beat, audit beat, metric beat, function beat, each beat for a different use case, packet beat. So that collects the data and like pushes into a different format. And then you also have APM traces, which I just mentioned. And then you also have the security product, like wherein a SIEM, wherein it collects data from the endpoints. So all of this is not being shipped in a common data earlier, like to Elasticsearch, but we actually came up with something that could help as a company as well as a community. So Elastic Common Schema is a schema that we have developed over a period of time, and then it's also on GitHub. You can raise feedback. So what it specifically does is like it's a correlatable common schema that can unify data coming from different systems, whatsoever this different system it is. It's like a large table of things that everything is mapped to a proper data type, so that whenever if you take a data from your applications and you want to do a security analysis on top of it, like understanding, say, okay, I got a post request, but there is no user agent, or there is something really wrong, and I want to unify. I want to check align with the audit data of my application, overlay one-on-one, and see whether the IPs are matching, or whether the ports are similar. Like I want to understand at the same point of time whether these two things are matching or not. So probably you might have a custom thing, like the Cisco routers, or probably say some other Palo Alto network. You might have a custom implemented a specific vendor related solution. So, but all of them, the data coming from that, using ECS implemented loggers or libraries, you can simply take advantage of it and unify that in the same structure. So I'll also explain how it can be. I mean, like this is very easy to understand, but all of the data that we aim to ship, all of the data that we have, the products that we have, like the beats, traces, will ship in the ECS format. There are a couple of partners wherein, like Cisco and Palo Alto, which has a lot of infrastructure. They also made changes so that like they could ship the data in a specific format if customers or users required. So, for example, if you are looking at, like the cloud platform or your on-prem data center, until you use Beats, or like say, suppose even Prometheus to store the metrics, but you can use a Beats metric modules. It will ship data in an ECS format to Elasticsearch. At the same time, with either one of them, you use all of these tracing methodologies, to trace your application, and then it can still ship data in the ECS format. I think like probably this is wrong because it doesn't ship out of the box like the ECS, but it ships here in the ECS format because APM is a server that we manage. So in throughout, you can correlate and you can unify the data, overlay on one-on-one. So that is one another thing to look at here. So I'll quickly get into the demo because I have an interesting demo to show something. So I have a Spring Boot app. I showed you the Google shell. I have built that, and I'll push that into a Google container registry image. And then we have already created a Google Kubernetes engine cluster before starting the session. And I think it should be ready. And we'll deploy that, and we'll trace it using some of these technologies. I know that the time is a limiting factor here, and we really can't probably implement everything, but I'll also have to take questions. So what I'll do is I'll show whatever I could do, and then if you have any more questions, I'm happy to answer as well. So here you go, that I have spinned up a cluster here, and then I have this particular, the username password. I'll click download on it, it's just a safe side, and then I'll click copy. And so the password is copied. I'll click on launch Kibana so that the Kibana is launched. And meanwhile, we'll check the demo cluster is up, and we just need to connect to this particular cluster so that it works. So let me quickly go and log into this particular thing so that it logs in. Simple. We just logged into the system. We didn't do anything specific. So let us connect to this cluster. This is a Kubernetes as a service, very popular Google Kubernetes engine. So I have this cloud shell, which is linked to the same project here, DevDish. The project is it's a different name, but actually the keyword is DevDish. So I have the cluster created, and let us see kubectl. Okay, cluster info. Takes a bit of time, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, great. So we have the cluster running with all things up, and we just need to build and deploy the stuff. So I also have a script so that we can quickly go and see the application that we have. So the application that I have here is a simple Spring Boot app. It has a one single class, application.java, and then I have an agent running here. This is interesting. So what we have here is a programmatic attach to the application from an APM agent. So what happens here is, if you go back to my slides, you will see that I have spoken about okay, the applications running in this cloud can ship the data to the traces. Even if you don't use these, you can simply ship the data to the tracing platforms, and then it can ship data to Elasticsearch, through which you can use it. You can use Kibana to look at it. So I'll simply kind of show you how this works out. So I have an agent, a Java library, which is imported here. And then I have an attacher which can attach to the binary. There are three types of ways that you can attach to using a Java agent. You can use the command line orbs. You can use the programmatic attach. There's one another attach that you can use as a jar that you can attach to the process and start collecting data. So we put this particular library here, but we also have to give where it needs to ship the traces to, right? So we'll need to look at the there is a way that you need to do is the agent automatically looks at elastic apm.properties, a file that you create, which tells about the service name, the application packages that you want to trace, and then the server URL, and then the secret token. So I already have something here, a demo, a backup environment, but I want to literally create or look for something and this password is only shown once. If you move away, you'll not be able to do it again, or you need to reset it. So that's why I have copied it. So let me quickly go back and copy the APM server. So if you go here, there are three things already deployed, and I have an APM server. I have a secret token for it. So to ship the data. So I'll quickly copy this one. Great. And then I also have the so assuming that I'll be able to ship the data directly to this from this application, to the APM server. But what else is there in this application? I have an authentication. This is a Spring Boot secure, the getting started Spring Boot secure app. So I just change a bit of it here, and then checking whether the user is authenticated or not. If the user doesn't get authenticated, what is the cause, and a lot of these details. And then if somebody tries to log in with an admin, then say create an error saying that there is no admin here, so that we can trace that specific error handle exception. I don't have any code here. I only have one particular line of code in the application.java, nothing more than that. I also don't have any other thing. Like I have specific user and password. The username and password is user password, and the role is specifically set. I have three lines, like 3 templates. I use template time leave, hello, home, and login. These are the 3 templates HTML files that I have. Application properties doesn't have anything. You have log, Spring Boot log, which is being logged at this particular place. So that's it from my point of view. So so you can also use specifically use something like a ECS logger to log the data in a format that specifically works. Because there's less time, I can't discuss more about it, but I can simply show you that. So this is a library that you could include in your pom.xml, which is an implementer which structures your logs coming from your Spring Boot framework in a format that the entire it can be correlatable actually. So that is the goal here. So we're just writing a ECS JSON file so that the file bit can pick up and send the data, but we are not specifically looking at that. We're just simply shipping the pod logs now today. So that being said, let us quickly go back here and try to ship build this particular thing. So I am in the same location where we have started. So let us quickly go back and see if we can run this application once and see whether if it is shipping the data. So this is on my local host, and then I'm trying to ship the data automatically. It shows that it is trying to attach the agents, as you see, and it's trying to connect to that particular host that we have. It's successfully connected, and the server is saying like 7.7.1, and we could ship metrics or stuff like that to that. So let me quickly get started, and then we can. So you could see that. I hope it is up by this time. No. It is now. Okay, it is not started. Yeah, it has started now. Great. You see a welcome. You see a welcome greeting, and it's very small. I'm sorry, but let me increase that. It's very simple. Then you have click here to see greeting, and then you have user password as a password, and then when we log in, it logs in. It generates the logs accordingly, and I have logged a specific thing, but you can also see sign out, and then I do admin, which is a place where we generate the error. You see the error being generated in this context here, understanding what's wrong with the specific stuff. Now, this is great. I feel that the data is being shipped here, and it's already there. Now, quickly go back to the Kibana to see whether it simply works or not, whether it is being shipped from the local instance itself or not. So I've clicked on the APM app. I didn't show you. I can show you in a minute. So specifically, yeah, you see the service name that we have given in the properties file, which shown up here. You see the agent that is being shipped here, and then you also see the JVM that is running this particular thing, my MacBook. And the CPU average, we'll not get into that, but we see that the data is coming, and like the data is being done, and a lot of these things are being done. So let us quickly package this, and then we kind of like ship it to the cloud, and then install in the cloud and do all that, collect all the metrics and traces everything from that place. So let me simply quickly package this one. If you have any questions in between, like you can write it into the comments, so that whenever we are done with the session, we can definitely take it. So don't keep holding on to you so that it's difficult. Again, you will forget. So I have already enabled the container registry. Container registry is a place where you hold all the containers. Every cloud has a container registry. AWS has a container registry. Azure has a container registry. Each has a different name. GCR, ACR, and maybe something with AWS as well. So I have enabled it. This is an API enabled from the Google Cloud SDK. So on thing, I have already done that. I could simply use this to ship this particular, build this image. Let me quickly see that I don't have any specific builds already. So I don't have any build right now. It's all clean. And I am using a plugin called Zib, which is another open source plugin from Google Cloud, wherein it simply, it kind of like simply builds the container image for you. You can also mention what sort of base images that you want, a specific image if you are looking at, and also the programs and multiple stuff. It's an interesting project. It's a Maven plugin. If you're a Java developer, probably you might want to look at that. Then I'll quickly refresh. I should see hello.java. And you also need to look at the tagging perspective. Like if the file hash or something changes, like you will have a different tag here. Now that we have shipped the data from here to there with the custom things, you can also run it on the Docker using the Cloud Shell. I think in the interest of time, I'll not do that. Let us quickly see if there are any pods and see what resources are there in the Kubernetes system using the Cloud Shell. Now remember, this is the shell that is there in the Google Cloud, and I'm doing nothing here. It's just using for the Kubernetes stuff actually. So now let me quickly go back and see. I don't have any pods, so I'll just deploy this. From the GCR, I have gcr.io/dev-dish, my project name, and then the container name and the tag name. So I'm just trying to deploy that. I should quickly see that the app has been created, and we can quickly get to the deployments part, like say kubectl get deployments. I'm trying to do this in Kubernetes for various variety of reasons, because Kubernetes is the go-to place for a lot of people, and then people run microservices in Kubernetes. Like that's why it is interesting to me actually. So one thing that we didn't showcase, or I didn't tell you here, is we have created a pod. But we haven't created externally accessible URL. So I want to show you that there is no services that exposes the service externally. So just like it's not your local host, right? You can't do that. I either need to do port forwarding and access through this particular machine, but we want to give an external IP. So I'll quickly click on the load balancer part, and then it creates the service, and we will get an external IP here in a minute, because it takes time to get an IP that from an available pool. And then you could also access this particular URL from your own browser, and can generate the data for us so that we can see that. So while that is happening, I'll also talk about some other things that we want to deploy here. So there are some specific files that I have created, and I'll explain you about that, and to collect the logs and metrics from the Google Cloud or the platform here. So this is filebeat.yaml. Again, in Kubernetes, it's a declarative way to like program and get all the data. So you have YAML files which can be deployed, and then you can collect data automatically. And using FileBeat, we are trying to ship. We're trying to like collect data from the FileBeat. Let me see if something is wrong. Great. Okay, using the FileBeat here, you could. Okay, I think I had some problem here in between. Using the FileBeat here, you can ship a lot of data, and you can do a lot of stuff. Let me share my screen here. Great. I hope you're able to see it. I think Elisa kindly helped me to, put the screen back. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So there's a blip here, and then I'm trying to push the FileBeat Docker container here, and then I have the logs and stuff enabled here, and then I also have the metric beat, which does the same specific thing. But where does this ship data, collecting the data? How does it get deployed? It gets deployed as a daemon set. It is not forking into every container of yours running on Kubernetes. What it specifically does is it gets the file beat is running as a daemon set, like a container, just like any other pod. But the logs coming from your own container, your own namespace is getting mounted onto the file beat. And then that is where we pick up logs and push it to other place in a structured format. Again, file beat ships data in a ECS format. But where does it know? Like how does the username password? So you could also give in the Kubernetes secrets. I have just given it here. This is not a standard way to do things. I apologize, but you should definitely use the secrets. But in the interest of time and everything, so I just use the cloud ID, which is there here, which is an identity for the cluster that you have. And then you also have the password that we have created, like Elastic and this thing. Again, it is a good practice to use a faceless or the ID that is not used by any user. You can do that using RBAC in the cloud. You can define permissions. You can see what is that user. You can also assign roles to that specific role. So I have that specific thing here. Now let us quickly see whether I would get the IP or not, and see if we can access this particular thing. I have got an external IP. Let me see if I could access that. I know we are very near, but also we are very near to the showing everything. So I have this accessible. If you want to access that, you can also see the IP and use it. So let me bring that here and see the data is coming through. So now that the application is started, we should see another JVM as well. So it shows last 24 hours. Let us apply the last 15 hours and see if it shows me anything different. So I'm trying to show, yeah, okay. Now you got a different container, you got a different traces, and more metrics around that. Let us pause for a while. And we also see that whether the error is occurring or not. So we don't, obviously this is an error that is generated from my laptop. See, let us see if we could generate an error in the last 2 minutes or so. So there's no error as of now. So we'll see if we can capture errors, and then we can see whether the related logs into that particular place as well. So I think it should showcase the error now, because we are trying to look at this particular thing. Okay, it takes a while and it tries to connect to that particular system. Yeah, just see the application. You can also see the occurrences, that how many times this error is happening, and you can see the traces, etc. But this is not what we want to do. We want to correlate the data. We want to see, okay, this error has occurred, where it has occurred, how it has occurred, what are the metadata that you have. You can look at the metadata here, but that's not it again. We just want to see whether the logs are appropriate, or whether we are able to see specific trace, etc. So if you see that it is showing the API that it is queried to pull this data. See, I'm trying to do a login, internal server error, the error that I've logged in, and then it's also showing multiple actions here. Like, see, I could correlate the pod logs, metrics, container logs, and multiple stuff. Let me quickly click on the pod log, so that like we'll go to the logs and we'll see what is there before and after. What did the user do, or do we have anything specific? There is no logs. How come? So because we didn't deploy the beats here. So let us quickly deploy the beats. This is the last part of the session, and I'm going to deploy some of this, like wherein you have, I have already cloned a specific stuff. So cube-shaped metrics is another open source project to which you will be able to like kind of collect metrics. And then I also have Kubernetes. So I'm just deploying all of these files, and I'll share this so that you will also be able to do some of this. So it's running, and I'm going to create a file beat YAML. I'm going to create a metric beat YAML, so that we'll collect traces, we collect everything. It takes a while, and we can see while taking questions as well. So now the app is deployed, and now everything is running. App is deployed, everything is running. We are collecting traces, we are collecting logs, we are collecting metrics, and all into a central platform that is correlatable. So the file should be here any point of time, and you should be able to see the data. But then it's also important that you need to like keep accessing this application, otherwise the logs will not be generated. It also traces the old logs. But then like let us see if we can see at the end of the session. Now, quickly coming back to the demo that we have. So I have few links here. I have put up a Notion page so that you can go and access and see what I have demoed here and where I have all the details. I should definitely go and check out some of this. Like I have put up a guide, some videos, and also blogs to collect data from different platforms, etc. You can go and look at that. And then we also have a community platform through which we run similar sort of sessions. So you can join there. So that's it from my side. And then I think because we are near time, I think we should take questions.
Yeah, so we've got at least one question in there, just a quick question asking where the Elastic service is running.
The Elastic service is running in I have created a cluster in a Google Cloud platform in Mumbai. In the first step that I have created, probably it has went energy fee, but then it is running in the region, in the Mumbai region. Yes,
okay.
It's running on a cloud.
All right. If there's any other questions for the folks out there, be sure you get those into the chat here quickly. Otherwise, I think we will. Doesn't look like we're getting any additional questions, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. But Aravind, please, definitely appreciate it. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I hope everybody else learned as much as I did from that one. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to show something here, but anyway, that's great. I think if you specifically want to look at the logs, metrics, or whatever we are looking at, I have a specific guide published related to it, and probably you could go and look at it. So I'm just trying to show, because we have time, see if we can show the logs, because by this time probably it should open up automatically. And you could also look at the infrastructure view. No, it has not come up yet.
Okay.
Yeah, come up.
Here's one follow-up question. Do you need a persistent volume for this as well?
Which one?
Do you need a persistent volume for this as well?
So I meant to say, like, when you say persistent volume, because we are also discussing Kubernetes, I'm not sure whether you're talking about persistent volumes, but the cluster which is deployed here in the cloud is fully managed by us, and then it has a persistent volume. We manage the data here. We also snapshot it every 25 minutes. So there is nothing that you need to worry with respect to the storage from the Elastic cluster. But even if you are building something on your own, we recommend persistent volumes, because you know that when you see a cluster down during your upgrade or your error, you might want to bring it back when you might want to attach it in a specific one. So persistent volumes are really recommended, especially this is a distributed system, and much needed actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Great.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And with that, folks, we are going to break for meal break here. So we will be back in a little while. In the meantime, be sure to check out the vendor area and be sure to network with your peers. Use that Umbrella platform to the fullest extent. There's also some comments in the chat as well regarding the secure coding tournament. So if you want to check that out, be sure to take a look at the comment section as well. Thanks so much. We will see you back here in a little bit.
Hi, Simon from Sneak here. At Sneak, we specialize in dev-first security. And what that means is enabling developers properly to find and fix vulnerabilities both in your application's open source libraries and in your container images. You can come and find more at snyk.io. That's SNYK.io. Now, we since last year acquired DevSecCon. So at Sneak, it is our absolute privilege to be here, and also to make sure we amplify and absolutely push DevSecCon to continue to be the premier DevSecOps event around the world. Come visit our virtual booth in the Brella application and come and talk to us about how you can enable your company to work in a dev-first security way. Thanks for listening and enjoy the conference.
Hi, I'm Matthias Madou, the co-founder and CTO at Secure Code Warrior. So we specialize in helping developers to ship secure code with confidence, and you can find us at www.securecodewarrior.com. So we are thrilled to support DevSecCon24 because we love to see this wonderful community coming together, and we want to be involved no matter what. So visit our virtual booth for more information. So that virtual booth includes some interactive activities, prizes, and challenges. See you there.
Hi, I'm Chris Weissopel, CTO and co-founder of Veracode. We specialize in application security for modern development pipelines. You can find us at veracode.com, that's VERACODE. We are happy to support DevSecCon24 because we believe application security experts and developers need to come together to secure modern software development. Come visit us at our virtual booth, speak with our AppSec experts about all things relating to secure development, and participate in our password program. Hope to see you there.
Detectify is a scalable web app security service that automates thousands of security tests to help you write safer code and release secure applications. Detectify's security scans are non-intrusive and can run safely in staging and production environments. Instead of performing version tests, Detectify checks your app using real exploits, simulating a hacker attack with harmless payloads. The service is continually updated with new security tests thanks to Detectify Crowdsource, a global community of security researchers. Detectify equips you with the tools you need to fix critical security issues. Getting started with Detectify only takes a couple of minutes. Just verify domain ownership, run your first scan, and access your first security report. So what are you waiting for? Fix vulnerabilities, build your security skill set, and release safer apps with Detectify. Go hack yourself and start your free trial at detectify.com.
Hi, this is Brandon Eyring with Zero North. I lead the sales development team. Thanks for joining us at DevSecCon24, the event. It's definitely a cool place for leaders in the development and security communities to get together, and the speakers and the topics are right on point. While you're here, feel free to stop by the Zero North virtual booth, get some information on the solutions that we offer, but don't take our word for it. Come see a demo for yourself and enter to win a cool prize. Thanks, and we'll see you there.
Hi, DevSecCon. My name is Heidi Waterhouse, and I work for LaunchDarkly. We're a company that does feature management or feature flags as a service. We have a virtual booth here, so if you'd like to stop by and see how that works out, we'd love to talk to you about it. I want to say that as you're thinking about security, I want you to think about how feature flags could actually make your security more effective and more cost effective, because I know that we're all thinking about how to do more with less. And one of the ways to do that is to make it really easy to control your features at a modular level. So stop by and talk to us about that, and we'll be happy to see you. Have a great conference, and I hope you get a lot of wonderful content out of it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Fernando Cardozo. I'm Solutions Architect at Trend Micro, a global cybersecurity company and leader in cloud workloads protection. Join me on DevSecCon24 on June 15 for a 15-minute talk as I will outline the importance of cloud security posture management for cloud service and compliance. Demonstrate how you can quickly set up a CSPM solution and introduce it into your infrastructure as a code pipeline, using security plugins in the VS Code or in the CI/CD pipeline. You don't want to miss it. Watch the live DevSecCon conference 24 or click in the Trend Micro virtual booth to see our schedule for talks. Let's help organization with the DevSecOps culture